Send the countdown. So we should get going, man. This is exciting. We're trying out a new
It's exciting.
We're trying out a new video chat. We're doing Discord. We're going to see how this works out.
Moving on up.
I'm pretty confident. It looks good. I like your video quality. But let's get started with this. We read chapters 3 and 4 of Outliers, both talking about the trouble with geniuses. They're talking a lot about how people think a lot of success is strictly tied to someone's IQ, but that's just not the case, right? It sounds like that's not the case. So it's kind of looking more into what goes along with high IQs and what makes a person actually successful in that sense. So it's pretty cool. I think it's taken a little sidestep from the first 2 chapters, right? Although it does still talk about how you need to be a part of these certain groups and kind of your upbringing and all that stuff definitely leads to a more successful person. We'll go into that, but overall, man, I thought these were good chapters too. They definitely fit in pretty well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's just, I feel like, his whole book is just, I think something to always note with all of it is the title of his Outlier. Like, he's specifically talking about, like, the craziest of the crazies, the most successful, the one that doesn't make sense, and analyzing those people and what made them successful. So I think that's something I'll also take away with all this. It's like, he's talking about the best, the craziest ones to ever do it. So that's why it's like, oh, they're upgrading all these other minute details. Not to say that you couldn't be successful outside of these things, and there's not plenty of great principles to take away from this. But he's also kind of taking
Yeah, it sounds like, he describes it all. He says, the successful people are the ones that follow this path. But he isn't really alluding to the fact that, it can't be everyone that follows this path leads to success. In statistics, right, you've got a trend line. And that trend line is going to tell you generally how one aspect affects another, right? Your X and your Y graphs. But the dots are not all on that same line, if that makes sense, if I'm letting you visualize this well enough. Basically, nothing's 100%, but a trend line is going to tell you the answer, is what I'm trying to say. And it seems like the way he's describing a lot of these qualities and these factors that make someone successful, it seems like that's kind of, it's the majority, but it's not an absolute. At least that's kind of what I'm getting from it.
Well, yeah, it's a majority of a minority. And another kind of point that he hits on a few times, I feel like he mentions it, but it's that like, just being good enough. Like, all the people and all the examples he's using, he's not taking everybody. No, screw that. No, he's taking, there's a bar. He sets that bar, and then he looks at everybody above the bar. And that seems like what most of the examples are doing. It's like, all right, let's look at the ones that are already successful, kind of, or have some aptitude to be so, and then analyze it from there and see what maybe sets them apart after they're already, the minority.
Well, it sounds like we want to be above the bar, man. It sounds like we definitely don't want to be below. So it's a good thing we're reading this book.
Yeah. I don't know if it's necessarily about like, when I read it, I feel like what he's saying is if you can get in the ring, like, if you can get to that point, what's going to separate you is your hard work, the amount of, like, effort and diligent stuff you put in, and understanding that what you're doing now is preparing you for what you're going to do later.
Yeah, he hasn't really gotten to that point yet. He hasn't really talked in these chapters about necessarily the hard work yet. He did talk about the 10,000 hours, right? How 10,000 hours leads to mastery. That's definitely hard work, and that's definitely consistency in your work. But, he hasn't specifically said that, these are the factors that lead someone to be successful, but you can break the mold by putting in all this hard work. He hasn't said that yet. So it's important that you're saying that for anyone who might be reading this book, to keep that in mind.
He doesn't say, I would also say to a certain extent he doesn't say that. Like,
No.
if you're
Oh, really?
like 5'2" and you want to play in the NFL, yeah, maybe you will get better if you do 10,000 hours, but I mean, the chance of you getting the NFL is going to be very slim, regardless. It's very much like,
if you're
play
5'2",
to your strengths, like whatever.
not if you're a kicker.
Well, I mean, yeah, you could be a kicker. Obviously, that would be the smart move. You know, that's strength. Even at 5'2", that would be really hard.
Yeah.
So, but regardless, I mean, then boom, he's playing to his strengths. All right, you know, even from that get-go, it's like he's trying to figure out a way. But I feel like that's one of the bigger points of the book, is it's like you need to figure it out. Like, you need to figure out what your strength is and what you could do. Like, oh, damn it, we haven't gotten that far because you didn't hear about the apron guy.
Dude, don't spoil it for me, man. It's like a movie.
But
I want to
basically,
see
you
how
just
it
kind of
ends.
need to figure out what your opportunity is, what your skill is. It's like with you, like, you know, it's like if you want to, like, you're doing all this project managing, all this stuff, it's like, boom, now it's setting you up for potentially becoming a contractor because you already have experience doing that. And it's like
Project
things like
management stuff.
Yeah, so it's like things like that. Like, you're playing to your strengths. Like, not to say that you couldn't go, hey, I want to go become a pilot, but obviously that would be fucking way stupider and be much harder. But you could, it just wouldn't be playing to your strengths. Like, there would be no opportunity, it would just be a decision. Which, obviously, what the book's saying is that, like, that probably won't lead you to become an outlier and flying planes.
Yeah.
You just arbitrarily
Well, because you don't have the background to lead to flying planes. At least unless you've been working towards that. That makes sense. You know, I was thinking about it because I was kind of, I don't know, I tune out some of the kind of harsher language we say, but I sure hope we hit that 5-minute timeline we were told we can't swear in. Dude, it's a lot tougher. It's a lot tougher.
I was trying to talk a little smarter, like.
Smarter, like? You sounded smarter. I was really impressed. I was about to throw some money at you. That's how smart I thought you were.
Yeah. But so I think they're good chapters, though. It's definitely interesting redoing it. I think you'll really like the next chapter. Since we should split this one up into parts. We should have just completed the part.
Yeah, well, that's what we did. I did part 1 and I did part 2. We do 2 chapters at a time. Chapter 3 and 4 is both talking about the trouble with geniuses, but it's part 1 and part 2. I guess, really, because the next chapter is like an hour, listening in Audible. I mean, they could have put this together as one, but I'm happy we read them. And you know what? Before we talk about the next chapter, let's talk about these. Let's talk about part 1 and part 2. That's what we're here for, right?
Yeah.
So part one talks about Christopher Langen. Have you seen Christopher Langen? You know what that guy looks like?
No idea.
So Christopher Langen, just kind of as a prelude, anyone watching this, he's called supposedly the smartest man in the United States or the smartest man in the world. And the reason why they say that is because he's taken all these IQ tests that show that his IQ is like 195 to 210, which if you look at Albert Einstein, I think they said he was at 150. Yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty incredible. And it took me a while. I listened to the chapter twice and I looked, because now I think he's like a ranch hand, or he owns something in like the middle of America.
Yeah, and basically was unsuccessful. Think extremely small farm, nothing crazy. I mean, not necessarily living a life he hates, but it's nothing to aspire to. Yeah,
and so that's the thing, because, I mean, the big point of this chapter 3 is he's saying that people directly associate high IQ. They say that the higher IQ you have, the more successful you're going to be. That's just a fact. That's just the way it's going to be. But you look at Christopher Langen, you look at what actually happened in his life and what he accomplished or what he didn't accomplish, and I mean, it kind of puts a wedge in there, you know. It's almost like, well, maybe actually high IQ, isn't it? And that's why it kind of goes into some of the other factors that influence it, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he does mention too, like, that IQ isn't like arbitrary. It's not like, oh, well, if you have a 70 IQ, like, you're a genius, like, you're not. But he kind of says, like, after a certain point, it doesn't matter. Like, if anything, it could potentially be detrimental, like in Langen's case, as far as not wanting to assimilate, you know, almost, you know, just let poor communication skills. or at least interpersonal. It seems like, it's like he's not working with people well. So basically, in this beginning person part, what it's talking about Langen, it talks about his kind of struggles with learning, struggles with school. Despite being extremely intelligent, whenever he's presented with different issues in education and different things, in his mind, it never turns out well. Even just trying to change his class, he gets denied. And when paperwork isn't filed, there's no one willing to work with him, and there's plenty of issues. And they just build on each other until he's just done and does not want to even associate with higher education and doing any of that stuff. And so
very distrustful.
Yeah, very distrustful stuff. But I mean, what are your kind of thoughts on everything?
What are my thoughts on it?
Yeah. Like, is there any part of it that kind of stuck out to you as far as like his experience?
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to what they were saying in chapter 1 and 2, that the successful people are kind of brought up to be successful from earlier on in life. If you're someone who has a higher IQ, for example, if a kid were more smart than, say, another kid, and they're put in like an advanced course at the age of 9 or 10. I don't know if that exists. Maybe it does. It probably does. It probably does. And when that happens, and you excel a lot more than someone who's not put in that course because you're given the opportunities. I think it's similar with him, but in his case, he had 4 fathers, right? He had his father, who I think left, and then he had a father who passed away. He had another father who went to jail. Maybe, I don't remember. And then the last father, this is a terrible guy, right? He said he would go leave, and he'd go on drinking sprees. He would lock the cabinets so that his kids couldn't eat any food when he was gone. And then he had a bullwhip that he would hit his kids with. I mean, you see, there's a lot of people. there's a lot of people nowadays who complain about a lot of stuff. You see a lot of people in the world, especially in California, who complain about a lot of things. Bullwhip, that's something to complain about, man. I want to be happy if that happened. Those are some real issues.
Oh yeah, just devastating childhood growing up, not a lot of support.
Yeah,
and not really learning those interpersonal skills. If anything, learning the opposite of them.
Yeah. Oh, I kind of went on a tangent. What I was saying is, that's exactly right. So because of all that, and he kind of grew up distant, and he actually, I think they said he got strong enough to protect his brothers from his dad one night when his dad came to try to fight him, and he knocked him out, and they never saw him again. So from that kind of upbringing, I could definitely see how that would lead to a little bit of distrust. So now you've got a guy with an incredibly high IQ, but he grew up very distrustful of the world. So that's initially. Then he goes to college, right? He went to Reed College in Oregon, but he said to me, it was a terrible idea because I was living in the country. All these guys who went to this college, they were from New York, and they were pretty. They're definitely people. How did he explain it? The guys from New York. He said they were city people, and there's definitely a big difference between country and city.
I mean, I feel like the biggest part about all this, and I think a lot of this he's taken is pretty quoted, is just like he's just so defeated almost. It's like, defeated. Well, I went to this place and I couldn't get a word in edgewise because of that. I couldn't assimilate because I'm country and they're them. It's like, what are you talking about? And then it's like, I couldn't figure out a way to get to school. And then when I tried to change, he wouldn't let me do it. It's like, it seems like every time there's something as a barrier, instead of just like a bump.
So it's almost like every time he tried to accomplish something, you're saying there was something holding him back.
Yeah, you always figure out a way to have something holding back.
And so is that
things to hold you back, but I think it's important to have those things not be what made your story. A part of it.
Well, so those things that held him back, I mean, is that something that it was something that was out of his control? It was, just things that came in and just ruined his life? Or is it something that maybe he had some doing in?
I think a lot of. I mean, I think obviously he quit all the schools and really stunted his own growth and didn't want to just assimilate and get along. I think there's a certain amount of you just got to get along sometimes. if you want to play in this game and do what he wanted to do, then you just have to follow some rules. And eventually, when you have reached the end of the game, you are now the master of said game, and then you can do whatever you want. But when you're in the game, you are not master. And you
The game. What's the game? Game of life. I like that game. Yeah, so, I mean, that's the thing. But then you got to think about some of the stuff he went through, too, right? Like, he had a scholarship to read, but then his mom forgot to fill out some financial paperwork, and he lost his scholarship. And they said, well, you had a scholarship, but, we didn't get the notice from your mom, and we ran out of money.
On it.
That's true. But how would he know to stay on it if he was raised?
If it was me and it was my scholarship papers, I would have been out every semester. Hey, gotta make sure it's filed. Just want to check in. Oh, it's not. Oh, but Mary already knows me because I'm there every freaking May, so I don't have to worry about it. Because I'll take care of you, honey. Whatever.
Well,
When he went to school, if he would have just showed up to the office probably 4 or 5 times and they wouldn't have thought he sucked. Because remember how he spoke to that teacher his first year, where he was the best calculus student, and he was just like talk trash on his like track. Like he just didn't understand how to communicate effectively. He's like, "Why do you teach so boring?" Or however he told it.
Yeah. Well, so
it was just like not working with people well.
So yeah, and so a big thing about that, I mean, you said if it were you, you would have been in there, but you weren't born under the same circumstances he was, right? You didn't have his parents, you didn't have 4 fathers, one who died, one went to jail, et cetera, one was an ass with a bullwhip. I mean, you didn't, and then I think they said at one time, because his dad used to travel a lot, he'd have a job, and then he'd lose the job, and they traveled all over the country.
Yeah, they moved a lot. I mean, I think all those things are really important. Like, I do think, like, having some sort of mentor or some sort of guidance or someone to kind of teach you at a younger age certain things, I do think that's really important. And so, obviously, that, like, does exacerbate the problem. But to say that he couldn't have somehow come out of having some sort of mentor or some sort of guidance or someone, if anything, I'd say a high IQ kind of put him on his own inner pedestal, and he couldn't just step away from himself for a second and realize that he was being an ass in all these scenarios. So it's like, if he would have still been smart, but slightly less smart, where he wasn't the smartest, then maybe he could have stepped back and been like, okay, well, I'm not the smartest person ever, so maybe I can do things wrong, instead of understanding that, like, intelligence has nothing to do with your... I mean, if anything, it wouldn't be that advantageous to be that smart, because you're dealing with a bunch of people that are less intelligent than you. So you're thinking all these thoughts, all these things that no one relates to.
That no one else does.
At a level, it's like I feel like there's a level where you're thinking, yes, you're thinking more thoughts, but it's like you're having connections faster than them. Not connections that don't make sense to them, just connections faster. So then
So building on that thought, that's actually something I've thought about quite a bit. I've dealt with some people who are pretty smart individuals, and they're so smart that it's very difficult to convince them of anything that they haven't convinced themselves of initially, which it's already impossible to convince someone else of something almost, because people have to come to their own conclusions about things, right? But it seems like it's like a cycle, right? So if you have such a high IQ, this guy is 195, and he's trying to say things, he's trying to communicate with people on his level, the way his brain works. He sees all these connections that other people don't, and he tries to say that to someone who doesn't see the connections. Well, the person who doesn't see the connections, first of all, has a bigger community of people that don't also see that connection, because there are more people at that lower stance. And they're just going to say, look, man, I don't know what you're talking about, and you're really passionate about it. It makes me think you're kind of crazy, so I'm going to step back a little bit. And that's kind of what happens. And that's, I think, what you're saying, he doesn't really socialize well. And the important thing about that is, if you have all these ideas, you have all these thoughts that you want to get out, and someone's telling you you can't get them out, you can't say it, what does that do to a person? That makes you only talk to one person, yourself. You can only talk to yourself, because you're the only person that understands what you're saying. And when that happens, when you only have yourself, and you've only been listening to yourself for years on years on years, then, I mean, it gets to the point that maybe social skills are very important, but I mean, you don't have the skills to communicate with anyone other than yourself, and you're not going to trust anyone else's word because you've been listening to yourself for so long. So again, it's like a self-repeating cycle. That's the way I see it. So
yeah, no, I agree with you. Like, and I think one of the lessons to learn from that is just like in your own, like with us, it's like arrogance is definitely not a virtue. Like you should not be, oh, I'm going to be very arrogant. Not to say that sometimes it's not fun. Like, yeah, like it would be so, like, it's definitely kind of fun. Like,
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm better than everyone else. And you know what? They don't know that. They should just accept it. No, I'm kidding. Right. Yeah. No, but I mean, yeah, that's the thing, man. I mean, it seems like the way to success is just understanding how other people work, understand things and try to, appeal to them and their knowledge and their understanding. And then when you get them to like you, then they start to listen to you more. And when that happens, then you start building a following. You start, getting more of what you want out of the world. And it seems like that's kind of what this guy was lacking, because if you don't get that initial step of appealing to that person's understanding, you can never get there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's Christopher Langen. They're pretty much saying that he had a high IQ, but he wasn't really as successful as someone with a 195 IQ should be. And so then they start questioning, well, what makes someone really successful in the world? Is it really high IQ? And then you remember they were talking about that professor at Stanford back in like the 1940s, and he did all those IQ tests to weed out a bunch of high school kids to get a certain group who had the highest IQs. And he basically said, oh, well, these kids have the highest IQs, so they're going to be, the future leaders. They're going to be running the world. And so he followed them over the course of their lifetime, and he gave recommendations and wrote them letters and all that stuff for their colleges and work and whatnot. But what was pretty interesting is that they were saying ultimately, some of them became nationally known figures, some of them became judges, some of them became lawyers, et cetera, et cetera. He said a lot of them got into jobs when they were older that were pretty unsuccessful, right? You could call it unsuccessful. And that's definitely a blow to the idea that high IQ leads to success. Don't you think?
Yeah. If anything, I mean, I feel like what he said was like the opportunity wasn't that kind of like as they continued, like the metric was if you took just a group of normal people with a similar opportunity, like you did say, opportunity was very key, like money, like class, all that kind of stuff, and location. Then they were equally as successful and equally as non-successful. So it's almost like that opportunity is a very key piece.
The opportunity to get there.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the same thing when he was using the example of the two children. And then at the end, it's great. So he's like, using the example of these two children. There's a poor kid. This poor kid goes...
Oh, whoa. Don't go into that. That's chapter 4. That's chapter 4, right?
I mean, I don't
know. Okay, sorry. I shouldn't cut you off. Go ahead. So, yeah, with the poor children and the rich one.
Oh, but yeah, so, I mean, no, we can wait. Now, I lost my train of thought, so just go back on to what you were saying. Yeah, start the conversation back up.
Okay. Well, we were just talking about how high IQs, they were called the termites, right? All those kids who, were picked to be super smart, but they're saying that really not a lot of them got really successful jobs. None of them were Nobel laureates. No one really accomplished what this guy expected them to, and that's a blow to any thought that high IQ is directly correlated to success. Right, so that's what I was saying, and you were comparing that to the rich kid and the poor kid, and the opportunities that are given to the rich kid.
That's because he keeps, but he does make caveats on. But he does state that though. There's a point where he says, and if you took equal opportunity, the people were equally as successful. So I was just more saying how opportunity is also a very important like aspect of this. So if you're avoiding kind of the same like scenarios to allow you to be successful, different people respond to those scenarios differently.
Yeah, that's when he started. They were talking about affirmative action, right? And they were talking about University of Michigan, how when they enacted affirmative action, there were a lot of people that were really against it, and it got up to some higher court. But what happened in their study, they found that really of the kids who got in there, even if the threshold to get in was a lot lower for some of them, ultimately they were almost equally as successful.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting to think about. And kind of going off of that,
it would be kind of interesting if it was a lottery system. Like, imagine that. Like, it's literally like, all right, there's these 25 or 50 criteria. You have to hit like 5 of them mandatory, and the other you have to hit 10 of the rest of them, or something. And imagine then, boom, you get entered in the lottery, and then there's no like, oh, you do this to get a better grade, and this, that, and the other thing. It's just straight up lottery.
A lottery? Yeah. Well, I mean, that's like, what they do for
UC lottery. Like, you literally like just put in all your shit, and then it was an equal chance to get UCLA and UC Riverside.
I don't know, man. People don't like chance like that. I mean, you're gonna be really happy when you get in, but it's definitely
and are freaking crying. You're like, I wanted to go to UC Berkeley or UCLA.
UC Berkeley's pretty crime-ridden, man. Berkeley's pretty bad right now.
Yeah, but it has a good name because all those smart people went to it in like the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, but does it? I mean, well, it's okay. It does. And I'm happy I went there. I think that definitely got me going. That's one of those opportunities, I have to say, that got me on a path to try to be successful. So that's one of them. But unfortunately, Berkeley and a lot of the UCs actually are in a lot of debt. And I don't know what goes on with the internal organization and management of money and all that stuff, but the city of Berkeley, I mean, every time I go out there, man, it's getting worse and worse. The homeless problem, it's getting bigger and bigger. The encampments are getting bigger and bigger. It's happening in San Francisco too.
On here. So he's talking about these homeless encampments. Now, let me just tell you here. All right, so he was telling me about this years ago when he was still in college. He always would talk, and he'd be like, there's so many homeless. And I'd been in Berkeley like years prior, and they're just a nice place, no homeless, like,
in Berkeley,
not a bad spot at all. And so I finally go visit him, and I'm like driving down the highway. The highway, you just kind of see some trees. You can't really see any part of like the town or city or anything like that. And you get off on one of those clover exits where it's a big circle. And so you're going on this big circle, and in the center there's grass, but you can't see the grass because it is a tent city. And this is the first exit to get onto the town. And you just go around this tent city, and then you drive down the street, and this like pretty. It's a city, so there's not actually like a lot of greenery. But if you've ever been in a city, they'll have like random trees. So it'll be like a block, and those sidewalks a little wider, and they'll have like trees put out. And so at every spot where there's a tree, there's a person under the tree.
Yeah, that's where the tents are. Well, because you got shade and all that stuff. It's pretty rough, man. I mean, and it's gotten a lot worse.
Every open grass area, there's just all homeless people. I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's really.
I would be homeless in a different spot, but it's so hard because you have to get all the way through Fresno, all that. Once you get down to like Santa Barbara and stuff like that, like that's nice.
I don't know, Cedric. I wouldn't want to be homeless regardless.
Yeah, but we always have this conversation of, well, if I was homeless, I would do X, Y, and Z to become not homeless. But then it's also we're not in that scenario, and then also that's why you do homeless.
Part of the opportunities, man. The opportunities that lead people to these positions. I mean, unfortunately, it seems like something went wrong, or maybe some of them didn't have the right parenting, and maybe they ended up there because
there's also a lot of perfect storms too. Like there can just be a perfect storm of this happens and this happens and that happens. It's like, oh, you're a single person. Your parents died. Your grandparents died. Like you like don't have any friends or whatever because you couldn't afford to live where they lived. So then you move to a cheaper area. Then you lose your job. So then you can't pay any money, and then you get a then you get a speeding ticket or some like not massive fine, like mild, like you do make mistakes, but mild.
Yeah.
And then now you have no money, and then now you have this. So then now you lose your car, you lose this, you lose all this stuff, and it's like, and you didn't do anything. It was like, 3 or 4 really bad things happened to you in a row, and then now you're screwed.
And then you kind of give up.
Super hard because the biggest thing that people don't realize is you aren't part of normal society. If you're part of a homeless society, people ignore you. When a homeless person walks up to you and says something to you, you say, you don't even acknowledge that they're there. And sometimes you just walk right past them. And for us, it's just a part of normal life. But if you are that person, maybe it doesn't necessarily hurt, quote unquote, your feelings, but you feel way more isolated and you're not part of that society anymore. And that's a big mental issue and why it's so hard for them to even come back into society because they don't know anymore. It's like you're just not part of it. Like you do your thing, society does its thing, and you're not part of that society. So that's a really hard thing. And then like the drug abuse is so hard because they're dealing with that. So they're dealing with not being part of society. So they have all these feelings, depression, all that. Then you sleep hard. You basically don't sleep. It's cold, it's rough, it's all these things. So they lean on drugs and alcohol to escape all those things. So,
Cedric, how do you know so much about the homeless problem and the homeless and all this stuff? Yeah, and that's interesting you say that. So, I mean, because it's definitely a huge problem. It's a huge problem out here in California, as we're describing. Oakland, probably up to Richmond. San Francisco is pretty awful.
Oh, imagine having to spend millions
huge,
of dollars to live in a town no one even has heard of.
What do you mean?
Like Dublin.
I don't pay millions of dollars to live here. Also, stop telling people where I live. We're supposed to be keeping that secret. Huh? The house?
How much is the townhouse worth?
I think he bought it for probably $900, but I think it's gone up. It's pretty expensive, man. I know anyone who's looking at rate, man. I would not recommend in California. I mean, you'll look at some of the trends. I mean, you got fires every year. It's tough, man. I mean, it's like this year the skies were all orange. It was that bad. There was so much fire. It was like what do you call it? It's something aversion. It's like it's where the heat is, or excuse me, the cold is trapped underneath the cloud layer, and then the sun is reflected off the top. So it's colder, and it was like 60 degrees. Yeah, Christian sent me something. I didn't read his text. But okay. He's very distracting. No, so we were talking about the fires. And yeah, man. So you got the fires. That's rough. San Francisco itself, the property value's gone down 20% since COVID started. So what's happening is all these people are moving out of the big cities and they're moving to the suburbs, right? But what's crazy about that is student.
Imagine being in commercial real estate in any of those real major cities. Oh, fuck your life, dude. Like if you, unless you're like in Austin, if you're like in a southern big city, you're doing fine. But if you're on these West Coast big cities, fuck. And if you're East Coast big city, fuck. Any place where there's any amount of weather and it blows, fuck. Like,
it's more so because I think the real reason Cedric is because it's so crowded in California. That's why it sucks, because what's happening is clearly people don't want to live in the cities in California. Otherwise, they wouldn't be moving to all the suburbs. If they wanted to live in the city, they would stay there and the property values wouldn't be going down 20%. So what I was getting at is while that's happening, homes in Sonoma County up north where there's a lot of fires, Napa County, Dublin, All these areas in the suburbs, all on the outskirts, they're going up like crazy right now during COVID, which is insane because there aren't, that many people working, maybe in the Bay.
Everything is going up right now during COVID because a lot of people are getting into real estate, but then because real estate prices have been going up. But also, there's a shortage of housing. And so it's just that, like, it's supply and demand. There's, like, no supply at all.
Actually, as a matter of fact, I was talking to an agent. So I was told if someone's telling you there's a shortage of housing, ask that agent how many houses have been sold off the MLS in that area for the year compared to, say, last year. And he said, on average, what you're going to see is that really it hasn't gone down much from what it was last year. I think it's just a difference in the times that people are buying. So that might be.
So what you're saying here is, so I'm talking about the quantity of physical houses.
Yes.
I'm not talking about the number of houses sold. So I'm more saying that like the number of houses that are going up for being listed, or there's fewer of them. Not to say that people aren't buying the same amount of houses, but there's fewer potentially being listed, and that's really just it. But also there's less being built. That's the other key factor. Like, it's definitely slowed down building massively. Not to say that there's not plans for a lot of stuff to be built, because there are, but a lot of that stuff had been slowed down because of COVID. I mean,
actually, I argue the opposite. I argue the exact opposite, because out here, people are actually building a lot more. They're building a ton of developments.
More, but I'm saying, like, COVID specifically.
Ton of developments.
Over 6 months, like, slowed down developments massively.
I told you. I talked. No. So I told you yesterday, I talked to one of my old neighbors. He's a general contractor. He told me he's got so much work come in, he's surprised. He said he has so much work he's booked for the next 6 months. He said, normally it gets busy in the holiday season, but he's turning down jobs because he's got so much work. So if anything, there's actually a lot more building going on.
This is all 100% like online with what I'm saying. Because if there were a surplus of houses, then he would have less work. If there was the houses being able to be built during all the COVID and everything, then he would have less work. It's because he has so much work means that there's definitely a desire. I'm not saying there's not a desire, but I'm saying that there's a smaller pool and people trying to do more stuff. So that's why he's booked out so much, because there's so many jobs that need to be done. There's so much building that needs to be done. There's so much implementation that needs to be done because they're behind. And once all that stuff gets done, it'll actually, not necessarily driving down prices, like actually down, but it will slow the appreciation a little bit, because there's just no supply. Like, if you're going to buy a house right now, it goes up, and they actually have bidding wars. Like, there used to be a time where you'd offer less for a house, and now
there's 20 bids per house. There's like 20 bids per house out here.
Yeah, and I mean, that just means that I'm not saying that people aren't buying at the same rate, because that's 100% true. But I'm saying that there's just less houses. So now you're having to spend more for the same house, and you're having to buy secondary houses that make more concessions, and then have to hire a contractor to make more fixes so you can get it up to your standard. So yeah. So and I think in a year or two, like, a lot of low-income housing and other things will get developed, because if I had a bunch of money, that's where all my money would be. Low-income housing, fucking everywhere. I would just be putting in, like, 30, 40, 50 unit apartment complexes. And that's what people need.
Okay. Are you saying we need to get back to the chapter, Christian, our manager? Oh, you changed the title.
Way better at this.
I know. Christian's a good manager, and you're saying you can only do it for so long. We're gonna have to incentivize you.
My payment better be more than minimum wage. That's all I'm saying.
You'll get lollipops, and other candy.
All right.
Anyway, what? Okay.
Cedric, so anyone watching the stream is listening to us talk to no one.
No, they can hear me right now. They can hear me right now. Anyway.
Oh, they can.
I changed it. Just get to the title. Come on.
Have you ever seen what's that one with where he's like Castaway? Have you ever seen Castaway? That's him. It's Wilson. He came back.
It's Wilson.
Christian, you wanted to know the title of the book?
No, we have to give him a weird name. His name is actually Wilson.
Yes, my name is Wilson. I don't know why you guys call me Christian. Go for it. Anyway.
Wilson.
So the title of the book is Outliers, the story of success. Right? That's what it's called, right? Outsiders, story of success. Cedric?
C. Yep.
C. Okay. Dude, what's going on with your cup? You're like fascinated with your cup.
Oh no, I was scratching off the logo. So not just those.
There you go.
Anyway,
I was
what
wondering,
chapters?
I was like, you're like
chapters are you guys
really
on?
going at it. I was like, what? Chapters 3 and 4. Trouble with Geniuses, part 1 and 2.
Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at chapters 3 and 4. Yeah.
Chug it. Chug that coffee. Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby. There we go, baby.
I'll figure out the description on my own. You guys have a good rest of your conversation.
Okay, we will. Thank you for coming on, Wilson. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Wilson.
Go back to Tom Hanks. He was asking for you.
Yep.
So,
He's
okay,
lonely.
so that he's very lonely, man. You seen that guy's beard? So, let's go back. Actually, I want to hit on the point I was saying about the real estate, and we can move back to the book. What I was saying is it's incredible that the housing price is going up so much here because you got the fires. So home insurance agencies are either A, not going to insure new homes, or B, they're going to raise the premiums incredibly. Right? They're going to raise what they're charging.
The worst one, they'll probably, you know what California's going to do? They're going to do what Florida does, where they have to make it so you have to insure them. You have to insure.
No, but yeah, that's like in flood zones. In flood zones, it has to be flood insurance.
So you're effed. Like the insurance company's effed, or the government has to then make their own thing.
But they're not doing that, Cedric. They're not doing it. What they're doing instead is they're not even insuring it at all. They're just saying we're not going to touch that. We're not going to touch your home.
I wouldn't put a loan on that if I was a bank.
No, and that's the thing. So banks aren't putting loans on. So what's going to happen when you've got all these houses? Because I know you're saying they're not building, but I mean working in utilities and
I'm not saying
all these being put in.
I was saying that COVID slowed down building, which is true.
Well, it expedited Caltrans. It expedited a lot of the work on the
stuff. A lot of residential and other things were slowed down.
So developments are going up like crazy. They have been it's a multi-year process. But, what's going to happen to these homes? And what's going to happen to all these people? Because California, although at this point I think they said there are more people leaving than coming in. But what's going to happen to all these people who want to buy these homes, but they can't get a loan on it because they can't get insurance on it because they're in a fire zone?
Matt, all I'm hearing right now is we're going to move back to California in 10 years after it just fucking just tanks. Then we can move back to California. We can get some houses in Big Sur and just hang out.
There's it right next to Esalen. You heard of Esalen?
No.
The Esalen's like, dude, they talked about it in the Stealing Fire book a little bit. So it's like they call it the Harvard of like human development or something like that. And it basically what it is it's just like finding yourself. And they have like these salt water, it's either fresh water or something, but it's like a hot spring. It's like a natural hot spring.
Tanks.
No, they don't have those, but they have hot springs. They have natural hot springs that are like in the side of the cliff or something. And I wanted to go there with my buddy. We went down to Big Sur, but I think everything was closed. We went a few weeks ago. But, we could just do that, man. And you're overlooking something beautiful. It's gorgeous down there in Monterey. That's kind of the way it's going. So any real estate investors, man, just unfortunately, California is not the way to go. Not the way I see it.
Actually, correction. I'd live on Coronado. I'm gonna be honest. I could do that. Like, if I had like 10 million.
San Diego's more fun, man.
20 million. If I had $20 million, I'd live on Coronado.
Is that down by San Diego?
Yeah. So San Diego's in a bay, and there's an island actually in the bay.
Yeah.
You can live on that island.
Oh well, dude, I'd live on that island. Just to tell someone I live on the island.
There's bridges and shit, so it's not like you can't drive on it. And but yeah, technically it's its own island. and it's very obviously extremely expensive to live on this,
Oh yeah.
this thing.
Oh yeah.
But you're insulated from the actual city, but you can still drive the city. But it would be small enough that you could get around on like a scooter if you wanted to. Like you wouldn't actually need to drive a car.
Oh wow. Yeah. So
Yeah. It's not very.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. So okay, that's where we're moving. But 10 years, buying a house out there. It's gonna be a vacation home though. You're gonna Airbnb it. But anyway, let's get back. I mean, we're like really talking
we don't Airbnb
doom and gloom. Doomsday, California.
We're gonna be so pimp. We rent it to like dumb rappers and bad businessmen. That's where you make the money. You rent the place, $50,000 a month. Great deal.
It's not a bad idea, man. I mean, people spend the money, especially in California. There's a lot of money to be spent where it shouldn't be spent.
Oh,
let's get back to the book.
Let's cars in this driveway. We can like just be like, oh, look at this Bentley you can drive. $30 a mile.
A mile. Yeah, they don't care, man. They were actually. I was talking to an inspector just yesterday, and so Woodside, California. It's Silicon Valley. And they have these huge houses. Actually, no, he was talking about Atherton. Atherton is the richest area code in the world. And it doesn't make sense to me. It's just this big rectangle that's right next to Menlo Park. It's not on the water. It's not on a hill. So you don't have a view. You don't have the water. They just build huge mansions in this rectangle. And that's it. And people spend I think the average home is like $9 million there. So that's why it's like the richest area code in the world. But he was saying that there was a guy who lives out there.
Building regulations or something.
Oh, yeah. Well, you got that much money. You're a Silicon Valley exec. Of course you got favorable building regulations.
Probably just like really chill. And then also
actually,
all your exec buddies live there. Like,
they are my buddies. So that's how we're getting to success, is opportunities. But no, so he was saying there's this guy out there. He's got a mansion. It's like 3 lots wide. And he said that all his workers and stuff, the yard workers, and he's got security and stuff. He said they have to be paying attention to his front door at all times, because if he ever walks out of the front door, he doesn't want to be seen. So he'll like have them like surround him and like kind of hide him. And I was talking to the inspector. He's like, I was telling him, I was like, dude, I'm wearing my long sleeve dress shirt. It's untucked right now. I'm wearing, like sneakers. I'm just trying to live. I'm just trying to work. This guy can't be seen. It's like, come on, man. It's two very disparate realities. I mean, honestly, if I were in that guy's position, I could understand if that guy is doing some shit. If he's doing some shady shit, I could definitely see why he'd want to hide. And I'd imagine a lot of people get a lot of money out there, definitely do a lot of stuff they want to be seen doing.
Yeah,
I could see that. But it's neither here nor there. Let's get back to the book. We got to talk about this chapter 3. We got to finish up on it. We were talking about IQ. We were talking about the termites group and those people, the kids who grew up, and ultimately, as a group, they really weren't that successful. No one got a Nobel laureate. The guy was very disappointed. So I thought the most important thing he talked about in this chapter was a divergence test. Divergence test where you're saying it's something that tests for creativity. And the reason why that's important is because he's basically saying that let's start with the fact he said that in order to be successful, you need to be smart enough. He said, as you kind of went into earlier, you said, oh, that's too smart. He said if your IQ is too high, it might actually hinder you, because then you're thinking too much and you're not that creative, and it's tougher to get in social situations, probably because you don't relate to people or they don't relate to you because there's too much of a gap. He said, I think the IQ of 120 is ideal for success, for a start to success. You want 120, and then you go from there. And he used basketball as an example, right? Talking about, he said,
players and being, I can't remember his metrics, but yeah, so you need to be about this high, but then you don't want to actually necessarily be that high.
Yeah.
Like crazy taller necessarily. I mean, just
well, no, but there's that Japanese dude. What was his name?
I mean, I think crazy tall, I'm talking like almost 8 feet tall.
Yeah, wasn't that guy like 7 foot, like 11? How tall was that guy?
No, he was like 7'2".
7'2".
Yeah, which is still very tall. But
that's a chain.
It's like I mean, I don't even. He might not even be that tall. Not even like.
What was that guy's name? I feel like that wasn't that long ago.
Oh, are you talking? So you're Yao Ming?
Yao Ming, that's the guy.
Yeah. So fun facts about Yao Ming. So everybody knows.
Wait. Where's Yao Ming from?
It's in China.
Where's China? Oh God, that was pretty bad.
People don't get how he's like literally an idol in China, and Yao Ming is so big that like not so much now because of some other stuff, but most recently. Not most recently, but fairly recently, Chinese people loved the Rockets because that's who Yao Ming played for. He played for the Houston Rockets. And Yao Ming is so big, he actually is on like the national board of basketball. He's like the chairman of the national board of Chinese basketball.
Dude, he should be.
Right now. So
he's the one.
Yao Ming is cool, super cool, super successful still. And
super cool, super successful. Is he the one telling the NBA that they can't be supporting Hong Kong?
Yeah, actually, 100%.
So is he still cool then?
No, he's pro-China.
No.
Yeah.
I guess you're cool in your own ways. He's tall. Makes him
so they
cool.
don't like the Houston Rockets now, but previously they liked the Houston Rockets. They even had like 3 or 4 games in China, and they were like the only team that had Chinese games because Chinese people love the Houston Rockets.
Oh, how things change, Cedric. Things are constantly changing. I don't know if he gets into this in the book, but one thing I would argue is that truly successful people are the ones who are not adverse to change. The people who embrace change, actually. I would say those are the truly successful people.
Yeah, it's all about being able to pivot and understand that like change isn't bad and change is just a new opportunity.
Does he talk about that?
In this book, no. That's like the hard part is like I feel like when you read all these books, like each book has like maybe 5 good points. 5 good, like really solid points. That'll stick with you, that'll kind of lasting. But after that, it's like you kind of need to read some other books and you just read so much because no one book is, I mean, maybe it'll really speak to you, but even then, that's only one perspective. So it's like in my mind, you want to read a lot of stuff, a lot of different stuff, and then kind of figure out what works for you, what makes the most sense to you, because all that matters is you. It's like, what speaks to you might not speak to someone else.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, we're all independent, right? We're all independent. We got different things that trigger different emotions, different things that drive us. That's one thing actually I was thinking about. I was thinking about asking you. Maybe might as well do this on a live stream. Cedric, what is it that drives you, man? Like, what truly drives you to want to be successful, to read these books, and to just get? I mean, what drives you, man?
Well, for me, a lot of it's I get bored because prior to this, I started reading stuff anyway. So I get bored, so that's why I read stuff. I feel like I was said best. This is John Green said this, and it's basically this is where I got it from. But basically, it's like I want to be a better observer of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And by reading books and gaining different people's perspective, now I can look at it in someone else's eyes, not just my own. And that's why I do all this knowledge, and that's why I want to be successful, because if I'm more successful, I can see more perspectives and go to different places and do all sorts of things and have those things better me and enrich my life because of it. So that's really why I want to do it. And I think also partially I think when I looked, this is a while back, but when I looked at people who are successful, I was reading all these books on different people, every biography for everybody that was ever successful, ever. And while I was doing that, I figured out that they all read books, or I guess I was like watching and reading about like shorter articles, but like not like reading people's books. And
sure. Not
what
normal.
I saw was that they all just read books. Like that was one of the key factors.
Yeah. What is that statistic? They say they read something like 30 books in a month. Is it something like that? That's a lot of books.
Maybe it's something like that, but I think it's like 20 books a year. Or so. It's not like an outlandish number, but it's definitely
like 30 a month.
Than everybody else. It's like 20 or 30 books a year. So stuff like that. I was like, all right, reading books is really important, and so there's that. And then it's also, I feel like the more I read, the more I put information in my mind, kind of with the 10,000 hours mindset, because I've read this book a long time ago. is just knowing that the more information I can take in, I never know when that information is going to be my opportunity.
Sure.
So if I can just take in as much as I can and learn and learn and learn, it's like maybe that is my 10,000 hours, and I just never do it.
So you are doing it without knowing.
Yeah, I guess really I'm always trying to work towards something.
Yeah.
And always trying to better myself or gain some sort of perspective or be doing something that's moving something along.
Is that something that's up there? Is there one specific something, or is it little small somethings that we're seeing what that leads to?
Yeah, it's more about what it leads to. Like I do have like goals and things like that. I'm just bad about like I do like accomplish a lot of things I want and get the things I want, or pretty much everything. But I'm not good about celebrating. Like I kind of get it, and then I move on to the next thing. Like I'm there. And that's
you don't reward yourself.
Yeah, that's something I probably need to work on, because I can just work and get to points, but then it's like once you get to it, it's like I love the process of getting to it too, but I need to kind of celebrate the wins a little more. That's what I'd say.
It's important, man. You gotta use the body and the mind. We talked about that. Make sure you celebrate, reward yourself. That way you're more successful in the future.
So what drives
right on, man. What drives me? Mine is more of, I've had some realizations. COVID has been a tough year for a lot of people, and it's unfortunately not getting any better at this point. For, I guess, the majority of the United States. There's a lot of inflation. I just saw recently there's a lot of small businesses going out of business. It's tough, but you know what, that kind of opened up for me in some previous experiences earlier. I told you that Kobe Bryant, he passed away in the beginning of the year, right? And that kind of opened my eyes that, anyone can go at any moment. I mean, that's just the way it is. It doesn't matter how rich you are. It doesn't matter how liked you are. I mean, it's just an ultimate fact that it's going to happen to us at every point. And so what that tells you, if you accept it, then you say, okay, I've only got one life. And if it's possible that it can happen at any moment, then I need to achieve everything I possibly can at every moment. Every moment. So, I mean, that's a huge drive. And I think they say that the fear of death is the biggest human drive ever. So I take that and I use the fuel. And I mean, I'm pretty confident. I would say that that's pretty confident. But what I also see too is I see a lot of disassociation between people and in the world and the nation. We've talked about this a lot in the previous conversations. I mean, politically, you see how diverse it is, and it's like they're spreading apart. It's like you got one side who doesn't know what the other side's thinking, or they do know, and they don't know why they're thinking that. And then you got the other side that doesn't know why this side's thinking, and instead of trying to talk and work it out, they're just butting heads. Yeah. And it's not. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, to kind of add on to that point, it's crazy that that's like obviously what's shown, but if you were to probably poll most people, they agree on a whole lot more than they disagree on. Most people are fairly agreeable and just want the best things.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I think people are a lot more centrist than we're let on. I think the issue though might be that it's a human nature to want to fit in with a tribe. Yeah. We talked about community and the double-edged sword of community. On the one hand, you feel welcome, you feel happy, you're a part of something, and you accomplish a lot more when you're a part of that something. So why would you go away from that? But on the other hand, when there's too much community, when you're giving too much of yourself to this cause, you lose your individualism, you lose yourself. And when you lose yourself, sometimes you don't think straight. And so, like I said, people are probably a lot more centrist, but when it comes down to it and they find someone else in like an arguing tribe, arguing faction, they fight. And it's not because individually they would want to do that, but because that's the group rule, because everyone else in the group is fighting. So you know what, to fit in, I got to do that. And so I see that, man. And I mean, we talked about it, man. The way ultimately, if there was more understanding in the world, just understanding, I mean, there'd be a lot less issues.
Yeah.
Because a lack of understanding of even ourselves, of our own emotions, they say negative emotions, anger, confusion, all that stuff comes when you don't understand your emotions. Because human beings, we have the we got the cognitive thought, we got the prefrontal cortex and all that, and I'm not going to go into the brain. I'm not going to embarrass myself in the biology, but animals just have emotions. They act on the emotions and then they move on. Human beings, we have emotions. We have to put those emotions into words, and we need to utilize that in a way that other human beings can understand it. And that's what gets people so confused and angry. So my goal is to first get rid of that within myself. I don't want any anger. I don't want any confusion. I don't want any hatred. I mean, negative never begets positive results. Never. Only positive begets positive. So that's step one, understanding myself. Step two is once I understand myself, then you can start to understand other people. When you understand other people, then you can start to get those people to work with you and to build something good that's bigger than any of us. Collaboration. We've sent people to the moon. I mean, you look at Musk, he's trying to send people to Mars. That's incredible, man. But that only happens with collaboration. And that's only a small subset of people. You got 7 billion people on the earth. I mean, imagine if all those people were collaborating. Or, as we talked with statistics earlier, nothing's ever 100%. So what if the mean of that, what if that trend line was saying that most people are collaborating, most people understand each other? Well, imagine what people could accomplish. And that seems like a goal that I would want to achieve in this lifetime. And to achieve that, I mean, it has to come through success. It has to come through building on, financially to get to the point where you can start to talk to people and just work with people to try to understand each other. Start small and hopefully it branches out. But that's the goal.
I totally agree. Like kind of riffing on what you're talking about, like people working together. Have you ever heard the story of the first Airbus A380 or something like that? I can't remember exactly.
The what? The A380?
Yeah, I want to say it's the A380.
Tell me.
So whatever the first Airbus was, and basically
Airbus
with the Boeing 747.
Like plane?
Yeah,
gotcha.
So there's Boeing 747, extremely popular plane, most popular plane ever, and there was no one competing with them. Basically, I think Lockheed Martin made planes, but they didn't really make planes at that scale. Basically, no one. I think there was a small Canadian company, but really no one made commercial airliners like that. And so Airbus came along, and Airbus is based out of England. But when the actual production of the first Airbus came together, what they did is they brought all the best minds from all of Europe, like France, Germany, everywhere, all of Europe, and they had each individual country work on a singular part to make sure that part is as good as possible. And then they went through, had production all done on the parts, and then they would assemble them. And basically what they did is the fuselage was wider, it got better fuel economy, it was more reliable, and then it had some like other techie features, but just from like overarching points.
Through the collaboration.
Yeah, and it was because of that collaboration they were able to do that.
Yeah, so I mean that just tells you, man, and again, that's just scratching the surface. Imagine if we could work together. I mean, we're able to identify ourselves. We're able to give ourselves, individuality. Yeah. We're able to know where we stand, at least on this earth. I mean, there's a lot of questions out there. There's a lot of questions that aren't understood, that need to be understood. And as human beings, with our only goal is to learn things. Collaboration, if that speeds up the process, man, I say let's do it. I say let's build towards something that leads to more collaboration.
What are some of the questions in your mind that like need to be answered that we don't answer?
Questions in my mind? In what context? There's a lot of questions in my mind that haven't been answered.
Well, I don't know exactly which one you were just talking about. Like, there's questions that need to be answered that we don't answer. And I was just more like, I just wanted.
Oh, like the universe, like what's going on in the universe outside of us. I mean, a pretty huge one for me is how is it possible that things can get infinitely small? You look at math, numbers can get infinitely small in decimal form, and they can get infinitely large, and yet everything is tangible. And yet, this is finite. It's tangible and finite to a point where we can identify ourselves in this, world that we're in. So I think a pretty interesting explanation of what I'm thinking is, theoretically, so say there's a 100-yard dash. Well, 100 yards, say you were to run half the dash, you're running 50 yards, right?
Yeah.
Well, now you're running another half, so that's going to be another 25 yards. Okay, well, now you're running half from there, and it's going to be half of 25, 12.5. Well, now you're doing half of that, half of that, half of that. And theoretically, you should never reach the end if you're running halves. And yet, we're still able to finish the race. You see what I'm getting at? So that's pretty big to me, man. I'm sure there are a lot of...
that doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make sense?
From a mathematical standpoint, you never reach the end.
Yeah, so it would always be a decimal point. You would never reach 100. If you were to cut 100 in half, so you're cutting 100 in half, you're running half the race.
Between like a fraction versus addition.
No. Yeah, you're not.
Yards each time you run, then eventually you're going to get the end.
No, but so that's the thing. So let me see if I can explain this better. So get my head on the screen. So you've got 100 yards. You have to run that. So if you're running 100 yards, would you say that you don't have to run half of that to get to the end? Does that make sense the way I put that? So you're running 100 yards. You have to go halfway before you get to the end, correct? Physically, you're going to have to run halfway. Yeah, so 50 yards. So from that 50 yards to the end point, you have to run half of that still, which is going to be 25 yards. So it's going to be 75 yards from where you started. Right? You still following?
Yeah.
So from that point, you have to run halfway from that 75-yard marker to the finish line. So that's going to be another 12.5 yards. Right? So now you're halfway from that point to the finish line. And so, technically, if you have to run halfway, I mean, you're going to keep going halfway. Mathematically, you would never reach the end because you're still running halfway. Does that make sense, the way I'm describing it? Tell me if you're getting lost on something.
Well, I mean, it all makes sense.
Yeah. No, but that's the thing. So what I'm saying is, how is it possible that things can go infinitely small? So how can you say technically, physically, you have to run halfway? And through that logic, I mean, technically, you would never finish the race, and yet you can still finish the race.
Well, when I look at that, I feel like when you by just dividing, by just physically deciding to use division as your means of like deciding what a full thing was, doing it the way you did it, you're never going to reach the finish line. Because if you're going to divide it and use division, you would say it took them this long to get it in this time, so therefore it should take them this long in this time, or like things like that to discern like an average speed. But if you're trying to discern like him completing it, then you're looking at a distance measure each time. So he's traveling 5 yards. So I feel like it's more of just the metric used to...
Oh, so you're saying it'd be better to add than to divide.
Yeah,
but
it's
theoretically...
because if you're going to divide, like you're just... like that's, in my mind,
yeah,
that's just
but shouldn't it be the same? Shouldn't the math work out either way? I mean, what differentiates division from addition?
It's
because you're running 50 and then you're running 50. Okay, that makes sense.
Well, because you're literally breaking it down. Like, what you're doing by dividing it each time is you're bringing it into a smaller sum, but it's a sum of a whole. It's not adding onto itself. It's not creating a bigger number or doing anything like that. Like, it just has to do with the principles of division. Like, there's the words we're trying to think of to describe it, but It just
No, I understand what you're saying.
It's just and I don't look at it as being weird because it's literally based off a whole. So if you keep getting a fraction of a whole, you're never going to get to an end answer because it didn't make sense for you to.
But it's still something you can do. I mean, it's still, if you're running 100, technically you have to run halfway.
Yeah, no. If each time you keep doing that, you will never reach the end. And yes, you will get to an infinitesimally small, close to the end, but you will never reach the end if you are truly dividing each time.
So
obviously,
at what point?
As people are not possible to do that.
Yeah. So at what point do you stop dividing? Because technically, you have to run 50 yards. So when do you stop dividing? When do you cross that threshold to get to the finish line?
It's weird the way you're doing it though, because you go, okay, so we ran 50 yards, and that's halfway.
Yeah.
So we'd say, all right, he's going to run the other half, which is 50 yards. So now he's reached 100 yards. Instead of like the way you chose to lay it out, where it's like, well, now he's going to reach the end by dividing each time, but that's not how it works. Because if he divides each time, he's never going to reach the end. Like you're just said, that's not how it works.
Well, yeah, no, and I understand what you're saying, but okay. So let me summarize what you're saying, so we know we're both on the same page. So you're saying yes, you do have to run halfway. So half of 100 is 50, but after that, now you have to run the other half. You already ran 50, so you have to run the other 50 to get to the finish line. And so you can divide to start off, but in order to finish, you have to run that other half. Do you hear that? It's like some noise going on. Hey, Willis. Do you hear that? Is there something going on with our stream? Cedric, you got to unmute, man.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess from a medical standpoint, basically I'm saying, like, if you were to
what's going on there, Willis?
Let's say we have 100 and you divide in half, you get 50. Now, if you were to subsequently divide the remaining 50, as much as you possibly could, you would get to like 49.
It's not him that's not talking. It's the thing. It's on. That's what I'm saying. It's delayed. It's not him. So he may have stopped talking. Oh boy, we kick him out.
You can kick him out, but the chances of him getting back in are very low. Let's be brutally honest.
What does that mean?
That means that he either has lack of motivation to join back, or I'm gonna do you a favor and there you go. Well, we shall be right back.
Are you pausing it? Pause live stream.
Alright, stream of possibly one viewer. Looks like our host is taking a quick break. We shall be back in just a little while.
back? It seemed like 5 seconds. I don't know if my internal clock's off.
Okay.
Back.
So, yeah.
What happened,
for
Cedric?
me,
Your
Matt,
phone
my
died?
it died. Yeah, but besides the point, technical issue. So, real point for me is I just don't get what's weird about it. Because when you divide something, you're never going to get to the end. Like, that's just the way division works.
Exactly. Yep. What's weird about it is that you can divide that 100-yard dash by half, and you can keep dividing it, which you're never going to get to the end, and yet you still reach the end. Because that's technically exactly, and that's something that you can divide. I mean, that falls into play with division. 100 can be divided by 2. And so you can divide it infinitely and you never reach the end, and yet you actually cross the end. You actually finish. So I'm just talking mathematically. No, you do, because people finish the 100-yard dash.
Yeah, but that's not the way that 100-yard dash is measured, though.
In 100 yards.
Yeah, it would be. It's a distance thing. So if you were like, they travel 100 yards, that's what they did.
So I'm talking about mathematically, because you said yourself, if you were to divide something, you'd never reach 0, pretty much. It would always be infinite decimal, infinitely small. So because you can say you can divide 100 yards by 2. So if that's the case, if it falls within this, characterization of something that can be divided by 2, because we agree upon that, 100 can be divided into 2 into 50, then it would follow the same rules, because then you can divide that distance 50 to 100 by 2, and then you can divide that distance by 2 and that distance, to where you're getting to an infinitely small number. But in real life, people actually cross the threshold.
By saying that half of 50 is 2 does not relate to 50.
No. Half of 50 to 100.
Half of 100. Half
is going to be 75.
Half of 100 is 50, and that's half of the distance, like 50 yards. But that doesn't mean you're finishing the race. That means you've gone half of the way. And then if you do it again, that means you've gone 100, 75% of the way. And each time it goes down, you get closer. But at no point you're going to get to the end, because that's not the answer. If you wanted to get to the end by halves, you would just run 50 yards.
So Cedric, it's not that we're trying to get the answer. That's not. So maybe that might be where there's a disconnect.
I guess for me, it doesn't.
I'm not trying to get. No, but it is. Because I'm not trying to, because things can get infinitely small, and yet we're tangible, and yet we're physical. I mean,
it's a theory, though. Like, it's just a theory. It's just understanding that you can keep dividing things and do math and do all these things.
Well, it's not a theory, because things do get smaller. Because if you look closely enough, you got cells, and then you look even deeper, and they're made of atoms, and you look even deeper. They're made of electrons and protons, and then you look even deeper, they're made of quarks. And what quarks are made of, no one knows.
True for
so
a race.
things get small.
Down to like a subatomic quark level.
But is there an end? Is there an end, is what I'm saying. Because how can something be tangible if there's no end? If it gets infinitely large and it gets infinitely small, then how are we here? I mean, how are we tangible? How are we finite? You see what I'm saying? How do we have an end? There's only so far it's very difficult to explain.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense, because I'm like, numbers are just not, like, it's literally just an idea. It's just like the idea that you can keep adding numbers and they keep going, because we built a structure, because we built all this. Like, these are all thoughts that we built in our mind. And humans have constructed. So we made a construct. I mean, not to say that we haven't used numbers.
You say it was a theory? I don't think it's a theory. It's not a theory.
It's not a theory.
It's a proven fact that things are infinitely small and infinitely large.
Yes, but that's a thing that we as humans have decided. based on our knowledge and what we know, and we set up those things. Like our numerical system is designed to not end.
But math,
designed when it doesn't.
We didn't design. We didn't create the rules to math. We found the rules to math. No, we found the rules to math. The rules of math they explain the laws of physics. The things that can't change or do change over time, it's all explained by math. That's how all these scientific ideas. No, but
that's all we made.
What we make is our way of understanding it. It's just an understanding of something that's actually happening. So if you imagine we're all on a board game, right? Game of life. We talked about that earlier. And we're all players. And say one of the rules of the game was that, gravity was a thing, the speed of light is a constant, the sun goes up, the sun goes down, at least the earth rotates. There's meteors that fly, everything's dependent upon gravity. Just the laws of physics. Those are the rules. Those are the rules of the game. Now, what the players are allowed to do is they come into the game not knowing what the rules are. But you give them the ability to learn what the rules are. So what they do is they come up with ways to understand the rules. The rules have already been set by who knows whatever the game creator is. The rules were set by the game creator. Now the players, again, with the ability to learn, need to find out how those rules work. And so that's what I'm saying about math. So math is our way of finding out how those rules work. We made them up. We said this is one, this is one phone, but that's just a word we made to make sense of it. I mean, it's an idea that is persistent whether or not a human being was there to understand it and think about it.
I mean, things like that, I would say it has to do with our own human experience and our own perspective. If anything, it's just expanding on that idea that you just said. I'm not disagreeing with the creator who gave you X, Y, and Z rules that you live by, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't theoretically have been lived by different rules where math would be set up differently. So that's why
how would math be set up differently?
Well, we can't know because we don't have that perspective. Like what I always think of is we're carbon-based life forms. So the way what we know, organic chemistry, is based off carbon-based life forms. But there might be a planet out there where they're based off Einstein, and the way they understand, the way they do everything might be completely different. And it's on a perspective we can't even fathom or understand because it doesn't make sense to us. Because it's in a world that's based off different metrics than what we're based off of. And so, math it's a construct in our own environment, but it totally makes sense because of everything that we both all equally experience. But if you somehow experience things differently and live in a different environment with all different things, then that same idea of math might not make sense in that environment.
So you're saying, I mean, I 100% agree with you. I've thought about this quite a bit. So, we say the earth is ours and we understand it, but we really don't. The only reason why the earth is ours is because we were born on earth and we've learned about earth. If you were born on Venus, that would be normal. You would say you own Venus. People belong to Venus. We know it. We understand it. But we were born on Earth. And so that's why we understand Earth. We don't know any of the other planets as well as we know this one. So I understand what you're saying. And what's also interesting is because I really can't technically prove I can't prove what you said wrong. I can't say it's wrong because we haven't gone to other worlds and experienced all that stuff. Yeah. Right? We haven't gone out there. Which actually leads into the whole point of why I say people should be more collaborative so we can go out there and learn more stuff. So we can learn these things. These are the questions. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is why people need to understand each other more and understand that only positive thoughts and positive interactions beget positive outcomes, and negative reactions only ever lead to negative in one way or another. Negative leads to negative. So, that's kind of, so I'm happy that's why we had this conversation. I mean, that's it, man. That's it. That's why collaboration. So I can prove you wrong. People need to collaborate so I can prove you wrong, Cedric. That's the whole reason.
Well, I don't care to be proven wrong. I think it's just funny
No,
how
I'm joking around.
because like that there are probably questions that for me are philosophical in nature that aren't for you. Just the same way when I look at that, I'm like, well, like you divide, like why would you ever even think that you'd reach the end? Is the first thing that pops in my head when I think division.
That's what I was saying. That's exactly what I was saying. Why would you think you would ever reach the end if you could technically divide it infinitely?
Yeah, because you can't. Now,
and that's what I'm saying. And yet we crossed the end.
But like technically you didn't.
Yeah, technically you do. That's exactly what I was saying.
No, I said technically you didn't. So I say that that as people, we say that at some point it is negligible, and we assume that you basically made it. Like at some point after you divide, you just round it. Like we round. But from a theoretical standpoint, you never got there.
Yep.
You never got there. And even like in the example, I just think it's weird with running because you would never think about it. Like, yeah, you could totally divide it. If you were just going to divide it in half, you would just go run the other 50. You wouldn't be thinking about trying to divide it in incremental parts to get to like one atom away. Like, no, you just run 50 yards. So you're in 50 yards, run 50 yards, done. Not, all right, 25 and then get down to where you're running like 0.1 millimeter.
Mm-hmm. No, but see, so that's the thing. I mean, you wouldn't be thinking about when you're running, but the whole point is that you can think about it. We have the ability to think, because all this theoretical stuff, well, first of all, it's, again, theoretical, I think is the wrong word. It's been proven. Things can get infinitely small. I mean, that's a proven thing. And what you said, at some point it becomes negligible. But my philosophical question is, when does it become negligible? I mean, what is it that makes a certain point negligible? That's my philosophical question.
It's arbitrary.
Arbitrary?
Yeah, it's just whenever we decide.
It's not when we decide. We're not in control of that. We live in a world that's dictated by math. I mean, we live in a world where things can be quantified and dictated by things out of our control. Like, you can't control the speed of light. You can't control, well, I'm sure people can create artificial gravity. I'm sure we're leading towards that, probably in 10 years, I'm sure, the way everything's progressing. But
you can also chemistry everything. Like, you can chemistry everything, you can art everything. All these sciences are just different ways to look at the world and different ways to break things down and different ways that people use to express themselves. Math is no different than art, and is no different than science, and is no different than engineering. It's all different ways that people use their brain to modify the world in front of them and to look at things. I mean, I think
the big difference in our understanding is that when you describe it, you say that we can control it. My understanding is we are not in control of math. We are not in control of science. Art is most certainly different than science and math.
But we are. There's like general principles that we have decided on as a people. Like,
this is art.
That numbers go on forever because they do, and we decided that.
No, we didn't decide that. We found that out. We found it out. That's nothing. To decide on something, you have to be in control of it. We're not in control of math. We're not in control of math.
But there's a history of math. Like, there were mathematics that did have cap numbers. There were mathematics that did have more limitations, and that did actually, you just go through history. There's a history of math. Obviously, there's a bunch of math breakthroughs and things that we found out to figure out new things and relationships, because really just math is looking at different relationships, but from a numerical standpoint.
Yeah. Well, so what aspect of math are you in control of?
Relationships in our world the way we understand them.
But what are you in control of in math?
Well, we aren't in control of anything because these principles have been around for like 1,000 years, so everybody does it. But we, as a society, decide some of the points. I mean, obviously, it's our own system of relating things, but we could make math into something else and relate different things to other things. Obviously, there's so thousands of years of framework, so I can't even envision what that would be. But there could be one.
So what I would say to that is, I would say it's much longer than 1,000 years. I would say, when did the universe get born? I would say that's when it was set into place. I would say we just found it out now. We just found it out over 1,000 years. It's simple. I think it's a difference between us of finding something out versus deciding something. You can only decide something you are in control of. The laws of physics are things we are not in control of. However,
I guess we're
you
looking
can
at different
manipulate
things.
them.
When I say like decided, we decided that 1 is 1 and 2 is 2. But things like the Pythagorean theorem and how triangles relate to each other. Yeah, that's a whole difference of angle, which is also partially too, like we kind of designed some of that too. But
we didn't design it.
That's
We didn't design any of it. It's just something he found.
Well, I mean, the angles and some of that stuff we defined, but I mean, the relationship between triangles is true. Like that's just
we can give them values in units, and we can give them a name, but we can't create math. You can't make it up. It's impossible. It's like trying to make a new color. It's like trying to make a new color. You can't think of a new color because we have the whole spectrum, and you can't think of a new one.
That's what people do. There was a time before division. There was a time before multiplication. Like the reason the Pythagorean theorem is a theorem because someone figured it out, and you know.
Like, but you're not making it. You're just finding it out.
It's the same way the internet's always there. Like the internet was always there. We could have always made the internet. When we had rocks, we could have made the internet. We could have made.
Yeah, if you knew how to. If you knew how to.
Yeah, if you knew how to do it.
But again, that's something that was decided outside of human control. I mean, we're not in control. We just, it's the difference between freedom, right? People say true freedom, all this stuff. This is why I believe there's no such thing as true freedom. I mean, we're stuck living in these bodies that we're born in. It's pretty ironic, I think, because we've got these minds to where, you know, we want to create our own things. We want to create something new, but really you can't create anything new because creativity only comes from your connection of different ideas that already exist.
So what you're saying, for you, you feel as though you're not a free-thinking individual, but that can create new thoughts.
Not truly new. Because if I could come up with a new color.
But you can't.
Exactly. So the answer is no.
No, I said
ultimate.
You can literally just come up with a new color.
Okay. And you can quantify this and you can show this new color to other people?
Yeah. You can just like mix pigments and then create a new color.
No, but that color already exists.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
No, not if you mix pigments and create a new color.
Cedric, you can't create a new color.
Just the way
I would tell you.
You can literally create completely new molecules. The school you went to has created multiple completely new molecules. Not a color, which is a hue, which is the way that we perceive light reflecting off a thing. Like a completely new thing. Not just light refraction.
Permission to
so
speak
we can damn sure create a color. I think
Christian,
it might be
what do you
negligibly different than another color.
Wilson, come on, get my name right. To butt into this conversation, generally editors and managers don't do this because they shouldn't have the right to. Anyway, with what Cedric's saying, that's true. Things can be created before, like new colors and new elements and new atoms, all that, they can be still created. It's just the thought that we think as a community that everything has already been made. So with new colors, with new colors, there could still be new colors that are found. There are new shades of black that have just recently been found. That is considered the darkest version of black. That absorbs light.
No.
I mean, that's just
you can't make a new color.
What he's talking about, and that's a true thing. That's recently, like, it literally sucks color.
Yeah,
the color wheel. No, so Cedric, do you disagree that there's a color wheel?
The color wheel is solely the colors that we have. Like, you can still create different colors.
Yeah, can you create a color that's outside of the color wheel?
Yeah.
How?
Yeah, there can be colors created outside the color wheel. I mean, if you
the
just
color
think...
wheel is
the colors you make are made by mixing the colors within the wheel. That's
those
how
wheels
hues
have a
come
finite
about.
amount of colors on it.
Well, listen, Matthew. The color wheel is the list of known colors. So it, like, to the standpoint of
Christian, where are you getting this information?
It's a factual thing. If you're trying to
From
find
where?
color,
From where?
Matthew,
look on the color wheel to
Matthew.
find
Think about it. Think about it. If you were to
I
find
don't
it,
have to. It's
hold on,
not
hold on, hold on.
right.
Just hear me out for a sec before you cut me off. All right. If you were to be like in a mine somewhere in like somewhere on the other side of the world, and you find a new metal, no information is known about it. Is that metal already known?
Christian, there's a difference between something that's known and creating something that's completely new.
That's the same thing with colors, though.
No. It's different. So what I'm saying is, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
We were talking about that Chris Langen. We were talking about that Chris Langen guy earlier and how he thinks about things. It's like trying to explain something. Christian, no, there's a difference between discovery and creation. I mean,
So what if
let's
you
see.
created new metal?
So if there's okay. If there's a
You can
color,
create new metal.
if there's a color that is not known, but it exists, then it will be discovered. However, being with colors in the color wheel, and I'm gonna be honest, I kind of just butted in here because I was hearing this debate. With
Christian, where are you getting this information? I need to know.
It's just common sense. It's just common sense.
Says
Like-
the guy as a junior in high school. Christian, look.
Hey. All right, manager
Love
of
each
PG&E, go for it.
Yeah,
Love
I
each
got
other. Love each other, Wilson.
All right.
Actually,
Anyway,
let me pull myself back. I should not have attacked you.
yeah, neither.
Look, Christian, theoretically, you can find a new color. All the colors exist in this universe. They exist.
I
They're
guarantee
set.
you, if I Googled new color right now, there would be brand new colors.
And what's the new
They
color?
literally are
Google
coming
it. Then Google it. Google,
They
is it
come out with
possible
new
to
colors
find a
all
new
the
color?
time. Like new paint pigment, new this, new that. So many new colors. There's people's jobs.
All the
It's like
colors
people
that we
have ice
see
cream.
around us are a combination of the primary colors.
Primary.
Yeah, so everything's made of the same three colors. It's just different changes of the colors. You can't create a new primary color.
That's not what you said.
That is what I'm saying. You can't make a new color. So it's
No, you said primary color.
yeah, primary color. So
what you're
it's
saying
that is
there's only
basically
4 colors
saying
now.
3 colors.
So
Well,
there's not even a
5
white.
if
White
you
is not a
include
color.
white. If you include white, but
But you said
it's
there are
3. So
But
what are
so
the?
black's not
So
a
are
color?
the 3? Black is not. Black is the absence of color.
I don't know about that. I would say it's a color.
Black is the absence of color.
See,
Dude,
now it's the
there's light
absence
stuff.
of color. But
Yeah.
so if I have a black shirt, that shirt has no pigment.
Well, so if you think about it, what's really going on is the light reflects. So it's white light, right? That's why when light reflects through a prism, you get rainbow. You get a rainbow color. So you got the red through violet. Is it red? Red through violet. That's what happens. So the sun emits white light, to which we see different colors on certain objects because those objects they absorb certain colors. So the reason why we see the sky as blue is because the particles in the air are absorbing all other colors but blue. And that's why you put on different different. Nah, I'm going to stop myself before I say something that's not right. But
All right, Matthew, I'm gonna call you on your bluff for new colors. So just give me a sec. All right. So Cedric, you said if you were to search up new color, there would be a new something would pop up.
Yeah.
I believe I spelled color wrong, but
can you pull it up? Can you share your screen to where we can see it on the?
It's on YouTube.
We have our own Jamie now. We have our own
Yeah.
Jamie. Young Wilson.
Young Wilson.
All right.
I mean, his name's Christian. We might as well call him Christian.
From June
It's
28th,
funnier when they have a
2016
name. I like Wilson.
today.com.
Christian's
I don't
name
know
too.
how trustworthy this is.
What's it saying?
It's saying a new color has been discovered and it's beautiful from 2016, so it's quite dated.
Okay,
Related
so
to that's a news page. Hold on.
So that's what it says. Read into it, and what does it say in the article? That's what gets everyone going in the media. The media says all this shock value, and people only read the article title. They don't actually look into it.
Well, because that's their product, though.
If you think all the colors in the
No,
spectrum
that's
have
what people
already
get
been
so mad.
discovered, get
Right.
ready to swear a blue streak. Thanks to happy accidental discovery by scientists, our world has just become a
what is the
little
article
more
on it?
true blue. Oregon State University chemist has Subramanian and his team discovered. I don't even know how to
A little more true blue. So this is a true blue.
blue, named after the elements yttrium, indium, and manganese, while also experimenting with materials, electronics applications. Oregon State University reports in a press release.
So it's just a shade of blue.
It's a newer shade of
looking at
blue.
it now.
You mean
It's just a shade of blue. No, it's a shade of blue.
I've seen that, or it looks a lot like
it's a
cobalt
shade
blue,
of
and it's
blue.
true. It's
It
definitely
was
blue.
existing.
It's beautifully
It's a
bright,
new
but there's
color.
more to it if you
It's
dig.
a
Hold on.
shade of blue. Our
It's a
definition of
color.
new color is
That
different.
is a new color.
The issue is our definition of new color is
Hold
different.
on. Let me
I'm
finish.
saying
Let me
you
read
can't
this. Let me
create
read
a
this,
new
but you
Matthew.
primary
change your
color.
argument halfway through. It's okay.
The
It's
pigment
okay.
I'm not
forms
changing
in
my
such.
argument halfway through. I'm telling you the reason why we're discussing this and have an argument is because we have fundamentally.
Truthfully, I'm just gonna turn them down so you guys can hear me. Anyway, the pigment forms in such a way that red and green wavelengths are absorbed and light reflects back only blue. It is super durable and stable and does not fade. Also, because of this unique structure, it can be used on buildings and roofs to keep them cool by reflecting infrared light.
Completely new color. And it has features. This color
It's not
has
a new
features.
color. It was an existing color that we hadn't discovered yet.
None of the
But he
pigment
literally said that it
ingredients
reflects
are
that
toxic,
light in
though we're not
different
suggesting you
ways
use
than-
them as a food ingredient. So using the
Cedric-
word ingredients means that it is being used
So Christian.
in. Yeah.
So Christian Cedric, is it wrong to say that this color did not exist anywhere ever? It was impossible to create it until we discovered it, until human beings discovered it.
I would say yeah. Based on what this guy said, yeah.
Well,
it sounds like it's unique
okay,
in
so
a lot
with
of certain
this, all
aspects.
right, hold on. Let me find what this is called and search it up because it says there are ingredients to what make it.
Well, yeah, you have to put pigments and things to make
So what I'm saying is that everything has already been set. If just like mathematics, things existed, other planets existed, we just didn't know they were there until we found them. This color existed, we just didn't know it was a color until we found it. So I'm saying there's a set amount, or maybe there's an infinite amount of colors that we don't know until we find it.
Create colors, though. We
But
literally
you
created colors.
create them with the primary colors that already exist. That's the
Well,
only
not
way to make them.
necessarily.
Prove me
Well,
wrong.
so, I mean, it's all
How
about
do you
what
make
so-
another color that's not within the primary colors?
Well, you
Christian,
added the
tell me,
primary
because this
colors
new color,
later on. Like we could watch this. You added the primary colors, and that was a new thing to your argument. And I'm not disputing that they're based off a primary color range, and there's primary colors that humans can see, and that's the dynamic range, obviously. But looking at this, defining an actual color, what it actually does as far as the way it reflects light, which is what this is talking about, and like what we're talking about with colors in general, then yes, you can create a new color. Now, if you're saying, oh, well, there's only set number of primary colors, I'm not disputing that. So, are you saying?
So
that you can
that's
make
what I'm
new
saying.
colors,
There's a
or that there's
set number of
primary?
There's a set number of primary colors. Every color that we can ever see or find exists. You cannot create a brand new color that hasn't existed in this universe.
Well, I would probably dispute that you couldn't do that, but we just wouldn't be able to physically see it ourselves because we have a limited light range that we're able to see.
Sure. So for things we can see, for what we can comprehend and see, and because it's key that every color is made from mixing the primary colors. You have the primary colors, those are set. You've got 3 of them. Red, yellow, blue. Right? It's red, yellow, blue. Every color that you can find or make is a combination of those colors. You can't make another color that's outside of that combination of those primary colors. That's what I'm saying. We can't even comprehend the idea. Gray is a mix between white and black. So that's where it gets theoretical, because I'm thinking like in terms of everything's finite. I look at the world, I look at the universe as it's a game. It's a game with set rules. The rules have always existed. They're always there. As the players, it's our responsibility to figure out what those rules are so that we can better play the game, to better enjoy it. I guess.
I guess that's where I think we differ substantially, because I'm a believer in, like, we know whatever we know now, but what we know now is going to be completely not true 20 years from now. There's going to be a whole different new reality of new things and new colors, new whatevers that we've never experienced before, because we will have gained so much more knowledge and become better observers.
Yeah, but we could have found you said it earlier. You said, oh, you could have made a computer in the Stone Age, but we didn't, because we didn't have that knowledge back then. So basically, by that logic, we could have done whatever we're doing 20 years from now, right now, but we can't right now because we haven't gone through the necessary trials and tribulations to get to that point. So that point exists, and it's just sitting there waiting for us to discover it, not create it, discover it. It's just a matter of discovering enough things along the way to discover that thing in 20 years from now. But we can't make anything new. This is truly theoretical. This is truly theoretical.
Look at it, because I would say that you're creating a new thing. Because I think,
but it's a tangible thing. Yeah, I mean, it's a tangible thing that can only be made. It's like a literal sandbox. It's a literal sandbox. You have to give sand. You have to put things in there for the kid to play with. If there's no sand in the sandbox, there's nothing for him to play with. That's what I'm saying.
I don't get your point.
I mean, I've had a lot of time to think about it. We would spend a lot of time discussing all this. It's very theoretical. If you haven't considered it, like I said, it's something that I've had to think about for quite a while.
Well, I think it's just more of a fundamental difference in how we think about things. I think you're much more like, this is how it is, like, it's broke rules, and I'm very much like, yeah, there's rules, but I look at it very much as all those rules, like, they're just going to be gone away. Like, there'll be different rules. We can accomplish anything. Like,
well, what are the rules to you?
There aren't really any. I mean, obviously there's all those laws of physics, but I'm a firm believer if we really put enough time and effort into most of them, we could probably figure out a way.
To make your own law of physics?
Just to defy them. I mean...
Well, that's manipulating. That's not making a new one. You just admitted yourself to defy them. Not to make a new one.
Like, those are laws that we, generally speaking, say that we cannot defy.
Yeah, you can't defy the laws of physics. You can manipulate them. You can't make a new one.
But we only know that now because of what we currently know. That doesn't mean you naturally couldn't. Because a lot of the physics has changed. Like when Isaac Newton, the apple fall on the head bullshit, he didn't know anything about space. He didn't know there was zero gravity. To him and to all those people for a very, very, very long time, that's just the way it was. And obviously, that's a discovery of something outside of yourself. But it's like, there's so many laws and all these things, but they change. And I think the fundamental thing is, we don't know what we don't know. And I think being open to ideas and not being like extremely rigid and, well, this is how it is, this is how it is. It's like, well, what if you could do X, Y, and Z, and then that changes the way it is? Because if you've never been exposed to it or don't even consider as an outcome, then it won't be one.
So I mean, could you summarize what I'm trying to say?
Well, so what I've got from what you're trying to say is that there's a set number of laws and rules, and everything from when the universe was created was not necessarily predetermined, but all there. Like, it was a complete set. And everything was possible at all times, and there's a set number of colors, there's a set number of laws, and our whole goal is to go out in this world and discover what those laws and set things are.
Okay.
Yeah, that's basically what I got from you. And then you can't necessarily change them. And
so you don't think that there's a set number of laws and rules?
No, I think there's laws we haven't discovered. I think there's laws we don't fully understand. Anything.
Yeah, but you have to discover it. You can't make a new one. I mean, you're literally saying the words that we haven't discovered, that we haven't found. Finding discovery, it's a difference between the words and the meanings of the two words. Creation and discovery mean two different things. So to manipulate the laws of physics, we may be able to do that in the future. Gravity may not be even a thing. That may not be necessary in the future, whatever. We might find some way to manipulate it. But the ability to do so has always been a possibility from what we were given just in this universe and what's given here on Earth. Another thing, too, is...
If you want me to agree with you, then I believe everything is 100% possible that's ever happened, and every single law that we ever know is 100% not true, because we don't know what is actually totally possible yet. So, if you want to agree with... I'd agree with you. Everything's possible. We don't know what is.
I guess what I'm saying is... I mean, the best way to explain it is people want to make their own world, and they want to make it, say like Lord of the Rings, like Tolkien made those books. He wrote the Lord of the Rings books, and that's his own world. But really, it's not a brand new world. It's just a world that's created from his ideas that were taken from this world. Like, the planet was round in his stuff, just like our planet is round. And there were people there, just like there are people here. And it's alive, just like people are alive here. And it's just, if you were to create your own world, it comes from ideas that come from this universe. I mean, it's not inherently new. It's not inherently brand new. It's not a completely new idea. It's something that was taken from here.
So do you feel like things aren't ideas if there's any form of inspiration? Like, you don't think that you as a person can make a completely unique idea because you were inspired by something that you saw or something you learned or some experience that happened to you?
It depends on what your definition of a unique idea is.
Well, because it seems to me that if it was related to anything else, it becomes not unique. Is from at least the kind of the way you set it out to me.
Well, let me counter that then. Can you create an idea that has no relation to anything?
I don't really think that's the way human brains work.
Is it possible?
Yeah, but I don't think that's the way we as people function. Something else, not us. Like, we as people connect dots. Like, that's how we work. Like, we're like, well, this because of this. I mean, that's what we know of as our intelligence. That doesn't mean that there might not be some organism out there that
Cedric,
does just appear.
Cedric, essentially what I'm getting from you is, because every time I ask you, can you prove that this is wrong? You say, well, human minds don't understand it. So it's possible it's out there. We just don't understand it. I mean, that's pretty much just saying that if everything's, I mean, you can't prove the opposite by just saying, well, you can't prove this wrong, so yours is wrong. But, honestly, in philosophical conversation, that's the whole point. That's the whole point of it.
That's
you can't prove this wrong. You can't prove that wrong.
Like, that's
I can't argue with you.
Well, you could, but I mean, it's one of those where it's like we're agreeing to disagree because we see the world differently. I just look at it as like people have said, like, somewhere think like and I think it's not that you're necessarily closed-minded as doing things. It's just the way that it kind of seems to me and like the way my mind thinks about it. So I can't, like, if I say the words that you say and like think about it like in that same kind of terminology, I don't understand it the same way you do. So if I think about it like that, I would just be like, well, nothing's possible, blah, blah, blah. There's all these restrictions. And but I don't think that's necessarily how you're thinking about it either. But for me, it's like how I understand it is like, there's no restrictions, anything's possible. people have done incredible things, and I don't think that there's any reason we should limit ourselves to the current laws that we know.
Well, so yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. You're saying when you create something new, it's something that has never been known before to humankind. I mean, it's a car. That's you created something new that people didn't know existed. I mean, they didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at the car,
new
the car is
color.
a combination of like the understanding of combustion versus explosion, and understanding gearing and rubber and air and all these different other things. That's a culmination of a bunch of human learning that at what the minute the Earth was created was things. Like they're all things. So
Yeah,
so it's
but
really just all about what you define as
it's
new.
utilizing what we understand of the universe and the laws of physics and all that stuff. It's utilizing that to make something new. You're not creating something that is outside of the bounds of the universe.
Well, the thing I always like to think of, especially with like laws of physics, like there's always like metrics.
Dude, we were talking about. We didn't even get to chapter 4. We're talking about laws of physics.
We're gonna chat another time about chapter 4, honestly. But even with that, I mean, we constantly just defy what we think is possible. Like
yeah.
I was looking at like cars, solely horsepower vehicles, and there was a vehicle made in the 1920s, like 1921. It was Mercedes-Benz, I want to say, and it had a 21-liter engine. That is massive. 21 liters. That's the amount of air displacement in the engine, and that's an absurd amount. 21 liters, and it made 200 horsepower. Koenigsegg this year made a car that's like 8 liters and made 1,600 horsepower. Now, that when they made that 200 horsepower engine, they thought it was impossible that you could ever defy the laws of physics to ever be able to do what they did with that, because there was all this new information, force induction, a bunch of car shit. But because of that, like at the time, that would have defied the laws of physics to do what we now do now, because now there are new laws of physics, because there's these new metrics when we figure out new things to push the boundaries even farther. So I think we're just going to keep pushing the boundaries. That's why it's like, that's why I feel like I want to keep saying like it's open, like we can do anything, like we can always think, like there's always a way, like there's never a no. Is it worth it to try to do it? I think it's really the question to ask.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it's a different of our understanding of what's new. Again, I mean, what you consider something new sounds like something that's tangible, a tangible thought, a tangible idea, something you can actually touch and grab. When I think of something tangible and something new in those terms, I'm thinking of something that doesn't fall within the definition of tangible, that doesn't fall within the definition of intangible. I mean, those are really the only two things you can have, tangible and intangible. You know, either it's there or it's not. And I'm saying, is it possible? Because I'm on the verge here, breakthrough. So what I'm trying to say is you can't create a third thing. You can't create something that's half tangible, half intangible. You can't create something that can be defined as tangible or...
What are your feelings on string theory?
I don't know. I don't know anything about string theory.
That's like a multiple dimension like thing that has to do with like the way that parallel atoms work in quarks or some shit. It's like there's some theoretical physics stuff, but basically it's saying that, I'm going to butcher a lot of this, but essentially they do tests on atoms, and when you videotape or do some shit, I want to say it's when you actually physically take a picture of an atom, it like behaves differently. Mm-hmm. And there's some people that theorize that this leads to alternate dimensions, and there's all these different alternate dimensions, and that like one thing's true here, whereas it's a completely different thing may be true here, and it's like a whole thing. That's like stuff I don't even worry about. That's like the multi-dimension stuff. I'm like, have you ever looked into any of that? Like,
I've seen Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about it on Joe Rogan.
Yeah. So that's another thing. Is like we only really exist in this this 4D-ish. I mean, not really. It's 3D space. Like we exist in a 3D space, not a 4D space. And then 5D doesn't even make any sense to us. Because
4D doesn't make sense to us.
No, but 4D, at least, like, you can almost comprehend that. Because really, it's 3D, but over time. Like, you're seeing all the action in one go. Like, that would be fourth dimension. Like, you're seeing all at once. But, like, the fifth one, I remember I was watching a video trying to even understand what that was, and didn't make any sense. Like, it just doesn't even really comprehend just on our own understanding. And stuff like that's where I'm like, well, what if we could somehow, going back to the other books we read, what was it?
Stealing Fire?
I mean, no, they said like biohacking, but there was like a cool term. I remember there was like one quote I wrote down that was good. But basically, like, turning us into cyborgs kind of deal. Like, who knows? Maybe there's one or two things we can do that heighten our senses, and now we can do X, Y, and Z that we'd never thought of possible before.
Yeah, I mean that's. So it sounds like you're saying we should probably get back to that chapter 4. I mean, we clearly got quite a bit. I mean, we just talk about philosophy. That's why I like talking about it, man. Because if anything, I mean, you're bringing up new ideas to me that if I want to prove it wrong, I really have to think through them. So they're new ideas, but I could have never gotten to that point if we didn't collaboratively discuss them. If we were at each other's throats and shut each other completely down, then we wouldn't have been able to come up with new ideas. And that's the ultimate deal. I mean, that's the ultimate point of trying to show understanding. Another thing I just realized, there's no such thing as true understanding. It's impossible, I believe, to have any kind of true understanding unless I were born in your shoes, unless I was born under your circumstances. I can never truly understand you. You can never truly understand anyone.
The goal is to try to understand.
Well, the goal is to try to understand enough to where you can work together. I think that's the goal. That's what I would argue is the goal.
Now you're going back to the minimum threshold. Oh, there's so much more. I don't know. Like, I don't look at it as like, oh, just to understand you good enough to, like, just to work together. I want to understand everybody as much as I possibly can, because that makes me better. Like, the more you can, because the way I look at a problem is completely different from the way you look at a problem. So if you learn more about me and the way I think about something, and more about everybody you talk to and how they think about something, now somehow you can bring the power of 100 different people's perspective. Maybe you don't have all their experience, but if you can just look at a problem differently, then now you can solve it in a way that you might not have previously thought of solving it. Just like when it goes back to the one book, if you only have a hammer, everything's a nail. It's like if you only ever, if you only understand surface level about how to work with people, then it's only a surface level about how you interact with them, not how they interact with others, or they interact with other problems.
Do you want to know what my definition of what would you define as God or a God?
I don't know. I don't really think about it. Like I guess what's your church? I don't know. Like, I don't.
What do you think people define God as? What do you think other people define it as?
I think it's different for everybody, but I would say, like, a general sense, it's like, which this doesn't necessarily resonate with me much, but very much an all-powerful being that's overseeing, like, everything we do and is there to, like, potentially help us, but also guide us towards a place of enlightenment or something.
Place of enlightenment.
I think how most people would kind of.
Yeah, all seeing, all knowing, all good.
Yeah.
I bet the good part was probably thrown in there to, get people to appreciate.
Well, yeah, history of religion's kind of interesting, especially when you have people like commenting on, hey, here's really why they did it. This, X, Y, and Z, other things that we now know because we're smarter. That's why it worked.
Are we smarter, or we just understand different things?
I would say we're probably smarter than people before us. It depends on how
smarter in the sense we understand more. We understand technology more. I mean, you could say that we're smarter and we can calculate things faster, but that's because we're using a calculator. If anything, maybe we're more dumb than the people that didn't create the calculators, because they did very intricate math problems that took days and just to figure out, months, years to figure out, and we're able to do it on a calculator. But it's a calculator doing the work, not us. So if anything, they were working through it they were technically smarter in that sense than we are now.
I wouldn't define them as being smarter, just because, I always think of there was this story with Einstein. Someone asked Einstein, they were like, "What's the definition of this?" or how many feet are in a mile? And Einstein goes, grabs a book, looks up, and it's 5,000 whatever feet. The person's like, "You're Einstein. You know how many feet are in a mile?" And Einstein's like, "Why would I need to know that? It's in a book. I can look it up." And I think that's really the principle here. Is it's like, we understand math. Back when they were doing that, like, just even the idea of solving a math problem was a challenge.
Well,
now,
what makes
the
a
math problem
person
is just a
smart?
hindrance so you can get to your answer, and you're trying to move through that as fast as possible. So it's like we're able to solve more complex problems and work on multiple things at once because the technology is aiding us.
So Cedric, what makes a person smart? What defines a person as smart?
I would say the most important things: problem solving and awareness. Those two things. It's like you can solve problems, and then you're aware of the surroundings that are happening to you.
So you said with Einstein in the book, you said, well, why would I need to? And I can just look at it, it's right here. So, I mean, without that, would you be able to get to the answer? Without the book, without the calculator, would you be able to get to the answer on your own?
Well, yeah.
How would you be able to get to it on your own?
What, the mile thing?
No, just doing math or whatever. If you're calculating something, say you're defining a new mathematical law. Say you're defining Pythagorean's theorem, but you don't have the previous knowledge to build on it, and you're saying you'd be able to find it on your own without using a calculator or a book or all that stuff. If you weren't taught how to find it, you'd be able to figure it out for yourself?
If that was my quest, probably.
And how would you do that?
I don't know, because it's not my goal.
That's not answering the
start
question.
Learn some math. But
what I'm trying to say, Cedric, is I would define a smart person as someone who discovers and is able to figure things out and do things on their own, not relying on tools and books and other stuff. I mean, you need to read books and you need to do that stuff so you can come up with new ideas, and we're very fortunate to be using it. But, I mean, he said in the book, actually, they're talking about IQ. What makes a person smart is their IQ, right? I mean, that's the intelligence. Then you got your emotional intelligence and all that stuff. And that's inherent. That's genetically inherent. I would argue that there have been people in the past during the Greek times that had an IQ just like Chris Langen. I'm sure there was someone with a 195 IQ back then, but they had different tools to work with. So can you really say that person with the same IQ is not as smart as Chris Langen because he lives in the current modern age?
That wasn't my point. My point was involving problem solving. So, to your point, if say there was a mathematician and there were two mathematicians, one used a calculator, one didn't, I would look at the one that didn't use a fucking calculator as a dumbass, because the calculator is not what dictates your knowledge currently. Now you take it back a long time ago. The difference is someone like, using a slide rule and doing it by hand. It's like, again, the slide rule makes more sense. Like, that's the tools that are afforded to everybody. And you just keep going back and back to whatever the standards are. So for me, it's not that the guy's any less smart. It's just that we do different math now. So it doesn't make sense to do it all by hand. So, I mean, I don't look at either one as being more or less intelligent, because my principles were problem solving and awareness. So you have the same problem solving the key there.
So that's the key answer. You just said you don't see anyone as more or less intelligent, but you said that you believe we're smarter now than they were back then. And you said, I would argue we're much more smart now than we were back then. But then you just said, I wouldn't say either way.
Well, so it's all about what you're trying to define here. So if you're trying to define, like, as a populace, if we were to pull everybody and look at a knowledge and problem-solving standpoint, I say now we'd probably be able to solve problems better than we were then. But if you're looking at just sheer intelligence, and like if we were to take a baby that was born now and raise it there, I don't think it would necessarily grow up to be any smarter than any of the other things. I think that we're smarter because of societal things that we've done over time to build on that intelligence. So, but like if you were to
I
take
could
the same
see
person,
that.
I mean, it would just be the same proportion of intelligence.
I could see that. I could actually see some of the systems that are put into place now. I could see them as more accepting and giving more opportunities for someone to increase their intelligence and their overall intelligence than they were back then when those systems didn't exist. And you had the monarchies and, the rich people were able to understand stuff and could read, but, the peasants couldn't read. And I would argue that's correct in that point, that more people are able to, one, get smart, and two, the people who are inherently smart are able to get even more knowledgeable. I would say knowledgeable. I wouldn't say their inherent IQ changes from what it could have been back then, just as they proved with Chris Langen. I mean, Chris Langen could have been, he could have been Elon Musk. He could have been the guy creating all these rocket ships, but he wasn't given the opportunities that Musk was. He wasn't given the opportunities because he didn't have the tools that Musk had to build off of and to, eventually create all his companies that led to Tesla, that led to the Boring and all that stuff. I mean, it's just a matter of the tools that we're able to use and the opportunities that are afforded to us through those tools. And it's pretty incredible. We're now wrapping back into this third chapter through all that conversation. But that's exactly what he's saying here, is that the reason why people are successful, seen as successful in the world, get what they want out of the world, is because they are afforded the tools to really take advantage of the world. And the people with the tools can take better advantage than the people without the tools. Wow, I can't believe we were able to wrap that back up. That was pretty incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, some of the stuff like in the book too, I like kind of disagree with, or I feel like he kind of like oversimplifies points, because it's like he definitely does say that, but it's also like I feel like he also kind of doesn't say that, like, so it's like weird because it's like totally reads that way, but I also feel like he kind of needs deeper meaning. I don't know. Part of the book I read into to make a better read for myself.
Yeah.
In some of the points, because I'm like, well, I mean, you can kind of take it however you want. I usually take that point as like why he didn't make it, as him not capitalizing on any of his opportunities, because at no point did he ever capitalize any of the opportunities. He only capitalized on his failures.
He didn't.
When
he didn't
stuff
have...
was going bad, he doubled down on it going bad. He didn't try to make it better, and then he didn't capitalize on what was given to him. He
didn't have the he didn't seem to have the foresight, I guess, to see that they were opportunities and to
I think that's where the 10,000 hours is really important, because then you start looking at it as opportunities. When you're like, all right, there's a quantity that I'm trying to get to, and each one of these things I'm doing is chipping away at that quantity. Whereas he had none of that perspective. He just felt like when I already arrived, why isn't it the way I want it to be? X, Y, and Z, instead of being like, well, I want to be an intellectual. I need to have X amount of experiences being an intellectual. I need to make sure that I'm staying on this track to become an intellectual. Then he would have stayed in school. He would have done whatever it took. He would have just done it because his whole goal was to knock down those hours, opposed to, getting at a spot where he felt like he was supported, when that's not the point. That was never the point.
So, Cedric, I'm going to ask you one question. I'm not going to argue it or give any, opinions, positive or negative on it. I just want to know. In terms of that question about fate and whether or not fate is determined from the onset or people are in control of their own fate, which side do you lean towards?
I'm a firm believer that you're in control of whatever you are. But I mean, even if you're not, I would still say you are. Like, even if it was said like, oh, well, you're not, I would still say you are. When it comes down to it, I don't think that you get any power by saying that anybody outside of yourself has control. I think you lose power. You start to blame those other things, and that doesn't help you.
If you say you're not in control.
Yeah. So that's why I would, regardless, even if it was 100% a lie, I would still lean on you are very much in control.
Cool. You ready to get in chapter 4? 2 hours later?
Yeah.
Chapter 4, part 2 of The Trouble with Geniuses. So, in this one, this is when he started talking about he had the terrible dad, right? He dropped out of those colleges, Reed College, Montana State. he was saying that the people in charge didn't have his best interest, and they pretty much said, hey, Chris, screw you, I don't care. Everyone's got to make sacrifices. And he's like, well, screw that. And so he started working blue-collar jobs.
Yeah, but you also got to think about what the guy did. He went to the dean of the fucking college to ask to move his fucking classes. Like, that's a fucking counselor's job. Why were you going to email?
I thought he was talking to his counselor.
No, I think it said it was his dean. It was like someone like really high up.
I'm going to have to reread that. But
yeah, I want to say
what I would say is
I'm not 100%.
Malcolm Gladwell's argument was that he did something that pretty much every college kid does. They just go up and they ask, hey, can I move this from a morning class to an afternoon class? And he said that when he did it, he was pretty much yelled at and told that, I can't believe you just asked that. No, I'm going to deny your request. And he's saying that, it was kind of brought upon himself from the way that he socially interacted with the guy. If he was like that Oppenheimer guy with a little more charisma, a little more savvy, he would have been able to probably convince the guy that, hey, you know what? Yeah, I will let you change. And that's why it's so important. We were talking about divergence tests. I don't know if we got into it, but divergence tests, which tests your creativity and your social skills. That's why that's so important. And I thought a pretty huge point that he said about that is that creativity, so IQ, your innate intelligence, all that is something you're born with. That's genetic. That's what he said. He said your social skills, your ability, your practical knowledge, your ability to interact with people and socialize, that is not inherent. He said that is 100% learned. He said that is something that the kids who have parents who teach them to speak up for themselves, to be entitled, where entitled I think was more of, he was talking about confidence. Entitled is a pretty negative connotation, for the word. But he was thinking confidence, kid to speak up for himself, to interject in conversations, and to, be in schedules, and the kids who were given more opportunities.
That does kind of suck though. Like this kid in this scenario is kind of a boner. Like you're kind of like, I don't like this kid that much. But
but no one likes those kids. I mean, no one likes, people who are pampered, who think the world belongs to them. But what's pretty interesting is if you step out of the whole picture and you take your emotions out of it and you look at what's going on, those pampered individuals, the princess or prince of the family, they feel like they deserve everything because their parents gave them everything. They actually do continue to get everything in life.
Yeah.
Because they learned how to get things from their parents. And so they just use that with everyone else, and they do get what they want. So in terms of success, even though you said yourself you may not like it, an outside person may not like it, it still leads to a successful person in a way.
Well, I think I feel like the example used was real, but also it's just kind of like one of those where you're like, well, this kid sucks. But yeah, I mean, the principle of just like being that it's important from a young age to understand that your voice is important and it's okay to speak and you can stand up for yourself and things like that. I think it's important. I'm not disagreeing with it. I just like that kid sucks. It's more of one of those points where I'm like, don't take this as a parenting book and have your kid be a freaking brat. Like read some parenting books and give your kid some good structure and have them do stuff on their own. That's what I would really say is you don't even need to keep your kid to, do the doctor's office. Just force them to do all their stuff by themselves. Like you just sit there.
Well, you heard
Timmy. Why the fuck do I need to go up there?
You heard what he said. I personally, I think it needs to be a balance. I think it needs to be a balance of caring for the kid and letting them care for themselves. I think everything needs to be in balance. I think that's the ultimate law of the physics in the universe, is that everything's in balance. Getting back to that philosophical, not going to go into it, but just like that, this is in balance. So for the kid, they were saying that kids that were, born in working families, they had found more on average, they were a little more shy and they were a little more standoffish because their parents don't take too much precedent in their life. They let them do too much on their own. And so while they found that those kids were more creative and, all that stuff, than the other kids on average, they ultimately didn't have as much success as the other kids from middle class and above because they weren't afforded the opportunities that are brought upon by the ability. What? It's okay. What's going on? Are we done?
What?
When was it on airplane mode? It's okay.
Max don't
It's
go
okay.
on airplane mode. Just saying.
Airplane mode? Be nice. I'd have to quarantine for 9 days. They moved it down from 14 to 9 days. Did you see that?
Yeah. Yeah.
California, at least.
Yeah, but it's not like they make anybody actually quarantine or do anything.
Must be nice. I saw.
That's the funny thing is it's like they have all the like I flied home for Christmas and they just say that they're like, oh, quarantine, but you're supposed to.
How are they
quarantine
going to
when you
keep
get
track
there.
of you?
Yeah, they don't keep track of shit. And even if they did, I would just be like, well, I'm staying at my parents' house. They'd be like, okay. Why'd you leave? It was like, I was going to the grocery store. I didn't interact with anybody. Like, what are you gonna do? Oh, dude, I got so depressed today. Which I'm not that depressed about it because I think most of my money is going to be in real estate and not from capital gains.
What happened? What happened? Stocks? The stock market?
No.
If you invest what I'm invested in, you've had a very nice month and a half.
No, it's fine, but what is it? Freaking trying to think here. No. Ooh, thoughts. No, they did a capital gains tax. The governor of Washington is instituting a 9% capital gains tax of gains above $25,000.
On what? What exactly? Just anything
assets.
for capital?
Any long-term capital
On
gains.
a state level, you're saying, not federal.
Yeah, and
there
it's
is a federal.
9%. That's like what? Federal capital gains is like 20% then?
Is that normal? Is it
No,
normal
that's
for states
absurdly
to have?
high. That's
No, but is it? I didn't know states had their own capital gains taxes.
There's states, but it's usually not that much. It's like 1 or 2%, not 9.
9%.
Yeah.
Guess you got to move out to North Carolina. Guess you got to move out.
No, that doesn't mean shit. You know what that means? That means I might become a resident in the state of Idaho for all my stocks, and then all the stuff that I own in Washington, where I actually fucking live. I'm just gonna never sell it. I'm just gonna roll it like, what is it? 1001 exchange, 1014 exchange,
1031.
Yeah, 1031 exchange, 1031 exchange on my shit. I'm never gonna sell it. Never gonna actually sell it. Just gonna roll into other properties.
So I think we're back live. I think Christian put us back live. So for anyone who's just catching back up, so they instituted a 9% capital gains tax in Washington.
They're talking about it. They're talking about it.
Just like how they're talking about an exit tax for 10 years if you leave California for up to 1.8%, along with the fact they're talking about raising the income tax to 16.8%.
Yeah,
like
no,
that.
It's just about the same kind of talk. So
it's going to happen.
Definitely annoyed about that.
It's going to happen.
That's a BSS tax. And that's a BSS tax because it's 9%. Which I guess anybody who's smart, that's the thing that really annoys me about this. Because smart people who actually are rich won't pay this. There's no way they're going to pay it. They're going to figure out some way to not pay it. But you know who's going to pay it?
Works.
All those people who bought their house 5 years ago and are selling it to go roll into a slightly bigger house, retire, move to Arizona, whatever. And they aren't actually into real estate. And they don't actually know what they're doing.
They don't
That's why
understand
it's dumb. Because it just hurts them. Like...
That's the thing. You know, the one thing I'll say about this book, at least in these first 4 chapters, I mean, the way he's framed it, it's like he's kind of framing it saying that socialistic systems are a better idea than the capitalistic ones that exist right now. I mean, that's the way he's kind of framing it, because he's like, well, you know, you look at, because he mentioned the thing about affirmative action in Michigan, at University of Michigan. He's saying, well, you know, they actually did a study and they found that of the, you know, kids who graduated from their law school out there, you know, they actually really performed all the same as they left. And he said, so basically, they're just saying that, you know, on average, if you give all these kids the opportunity to at least get in the program, they're all going to perform the same, which is successful if it's a successful program, which, is essentially talking up affirmative action is
But he continues that though, because he says it's not even affirmative action. It's like how they should really run it is just literally set a bar, like you need to get these things, and then you apply, and then we just pick it, and we just randomly pick it.
So I guess going off what you're saying,
which I wouldn't say is necessarily a socialist idea.
Yeah,
it's still capitalist in a sense. It's just a different way of selecting your.
Yeah. So going off of what you're saying, what should be the case is whatever. So if someone with a lower threshold is able to be just as successful, then that lower threshold should be the mark for anyone to get in. So you shouldn't give a certain person benefits over another person because of their age, their race, their sex. That shouldn't be a thing. But if you can
it's also a hard
that the
point
threshold
too, because,
is there.
I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, it's a complicated issue because there really are disadvantaged people. There really are it's just true. Like there's a lot of things that have been in stages for a long time. I mean, like we always talk about real estate specifically as being something that has transcended generations and have lifted people out of poverty and done all these great things. And that's why we talk about it. But I mean, you look at black people were limited on getting loans. They were limited on where they could live. They were limited on a bunch of stuff. And yeah, that stopped fairly recently, but that's only a generation ago.
Mm-hmm.
So that means my grandparents weren't able to buy any of that, which means that they didn't set up my parents and then set up me. Stuff like that. And what he's saying is basically if you could just hit the minimum threshold, then it doesn't really matter your success. But it's also, I understand why colleges do this, because they want diversity of people. Because if you have one person from one thing, you're going to get one idea.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why. So it's a balancing act too, because they want good people from this area, and then they want good people in this area have this experience and that experience and all these different types of things. So
yeah,
I like the minimum threshold idea, because it's you could just then pick them, and then it wouldn't be it's just kind of if you meet this threshold and you just get picked randomly. Affirmative action's hard, and
the lottery you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, because that's really the point he made, is that it doesn't matter. What matters is that you were good enough, not whether you were the best. Is really what.
Because sometimes when you're too far above, when you're too much of an outlier, you actually don't hit that success. You want to hit the sweet spot.
Yeah, and really, what I've kind of got, I haven't read the whole book, but really, what I get from it is just that you need to put in work. So if you're good enough to have an opportunity to actually achieve something and be an outlier, then you need to capitalize on that, and you need to get as much experience, and you need to understand that's the start of your journey, not the end. Once you're good, once you've even gotten to the point. So that's what his point was. Is it's these people are all good enough to be in law school, but what dictated their success was their own merit after that.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. So just be successful, but you definitely need to have the tools to get you to that point of understanding. And once you get to that point, it's on you to work to understand it.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that. All right. Well, dude, I think we talked about those in full. We talked about a lot more. We talked about
really a lot of
new colors and new ideas outside of our realm of understanding. We talked about quite a bit. That was a lot of fun.
No, it's always good to get a little conversation going.
Chrissy T, that's actually Chrissy J. His middle name's John. I think we're about done.
I like it.
Chrissy J.
Chrissy J. Chrissy T.
Chrissy T.
Chrissy T.
T just kind of comes out of there. I don't know.
Yeah.
So Christian, I don't know, hopefully you can hear us. We're about done, man. So did you take it off? Sweet. All right, until next time. You want to go on Sunday? Then we'll
Yeah.
start this Sunday. We'll go Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday. That way we can hit our 3 because we're doing New Year's Eve. And, you know, Christmas.
Yeah.